Greetings to all Africans around the world. Today is Sunday, March 1st, 2026, and you are watching United States of Africa TV. I am Akosua Prempe, broadcasting from the United States of Africa. In today's special comprehensive report, we bring you full coverage of the Prime Minister's major address before the Transitional Legislative Assembly of Burkina Faso, and the critical parliamentary questions that followed. First, we examined the government's presentation of national progress, intensified security operations, restructuring of the armed forces, expanded recruitment, advanced military acquisitions, and the reported recovery of nearly 3/4 of national territory. The Prime Minister also outlined the return of more than 1 million displaced citizens, the reopening of schools and health centres, record agricultural production exceeding 7 million tonnes of cereals, industrial expansion, infrastructure development, anti-corruption reforms, and strengthened sovereignty within the Confederation of Sahel States. He emphasised a shift toward an endogenous development model rooted in sovereignty, patriotic responsibility, and national self-determination, described as a structural transformation of Burkina Faso politically, economically, and socially. Then, we bring you what happened next. Deputies returned to the chamber and raised serious national concerns, including calls for a new constitution, stronger anti-drug measures near schools, hospital equipment shortages, disability access, delayed cotton producer payments, reconciliation efforts, VDP training and welfare, housing affordability, medicine prices, infrastructure completion, climate pressures, road safety, digital disruptions, and the status of major projects such as Donsin Airport and the Burkina SAT-1 satellite. This is not just a speech. This is a national moment of accountability, reform, and debate. Before we begin, I encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this report on WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, and all social media platforms. Let us connect Africans everywhere and strengthen unity across our continent through information and dialogue. Now, let us go into the full report.
Burkina Faso's diplomatic influence on the international stage.
We all followed it. It was in March 2025, and for the first point, the fight against terrorism and the recovery of territorial integrity. The measures to achieve this goal included, among others, the deep reorganization of the army to make it more operational and more effective with a sharper firepower. On this subject, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "The gains made in terms of army reorganization, equipment and weaponry are unprecedented." End of quote. In figures and the point made by the head of government, 2025 therefore reported 28 Rapid Intervention Battalions, BIR created, 13 Mobile Intervention Unit groups, 14,000 soldiers of all profiles recruited, thousands of VDP recruited, trained and equipped. We are all witnesses to the multiple acquisitions of our fighting forces, high-tech equipment of all types, drones and other warplanes that scan, track and deal with terrorists daily, all accompanied by a better territorial coverage which allowed for the recovery of more than 71% of the territory. We imagine that the figures have evolved significantly, which is our wish, by the way. And we are waiting for the presentation for the updated figures on the reconquest of the national territory.
So all these actions, it should be remembered, Amadou Marcel, the rate of territorial reconquest allowed for the resettlement of populations. The latest figures show more than 1 million people have returned to nearly 700 localities formerly under terrorist control. And here too, we see it through multiple testimonies via our various communication channels and our different reports. This is an opportunity for me, Amadou Marcel, to pay tribute to our reporters, Liradan Philippe Ada, Bienvenue Tansa, Draman Gene, who is currently at school, who made the impact of the reconquest visible, and to make visible and pay tribute to the sacrifice of the fighting forces. Their contribution, in my opinion, has been significant in mobilizing Burkina Faso from here and elsewhere to support this struggle, which has become a struggle for survival. And this mobilization of the populations has resulted in several actions, including the contributions at least to the Patriotic Support Fund. In 2024, we were at more than 175 billion francs mobilized compared to 99 billion in 2023. And for 2025, we are at more than 200 billion CFA francs. Still, in terms of the urgent and efficient response to the humanitarian crisis, the second point of the Prime Minister's presentation in 2025, it must be said that in addition to supporting the resettlement of populations in their localities of origin, the government has ensured the revitalization of the local economies of the affected populations. Thus, great investment projects have been launched. They have enabled, among other things, the completion of 500 socio-economic infrastructures. It should be noted that this was the report for 2024. This report also shows that over 90,000 women have benefited from loans. 30,000 belonging to women's organizations have benefited from technologies. And in terms of education, over 1,400 educational structures have been reopened, 400 relocated, and many other actions that have allowed thousands of children to stay in or return to the education system. Marcel Tau.
On the social front as well, let's note great progress, particularly in the area of health. Current health news remains marked by the continuity of care and emergency services and the reopening of over 200 health facilities. Once again in 2024, it's the creation of 60 advanced health posts and the recruitment and deployment of 15 community-based health workers. The arrival and introduction of mobile clinics, we remember that stage well as part of the Presidential Health Initiative being rolled out. And it will allow for the construction of infrastructure along with the reduction in costs for certain health services.
Now, it should be recalled that the third point of the Prime Minister's presentation in 2025 concerned food sovereignty, described as a symbol of real independence by the Prime Minister. This sovereignty holds a prominent place in the actions of the MPSR2. The current authorities are sparing no expense for this sovereignty. And as proof, if anyone needed, of course, we have vast programs. The Agropastoral and Fisheries Offensive and the Presidential Initiative for Agricultural Production and Food Self-Sufficiency. Two programs based on a simple and practical economic model involving producers, defense and security forces, VDP, detainees, internally displaced persons, and processors. The combined effects have, moreover, allowed Burkina to reach a record and surplus cereal production of 7 million tons. The Prime Minister will certainly return in detail to this, I would say, glorious page of our country's agricultural production.
Christine Koulibaly, what do you take away from the fourth point? The fourth point of the Prime Minister's presentation last year was dedicated to good governance and the fight against fraud. It also constitutes an important dimension of government action and concerns the settlement of judicial liabilities, the fight against fraud in all its forms, and the fight against incivility and corruption. And since the captain came to power, many measures have been taken to correct dysfunctions. Reforms have also been carried out and companies have been audited. All these actions have made it possible to sanitize the national market, to control financial flows, and above all, to mobilize significant resources for the national budget. At the same time, the government has continued its policy of reducing the lifestyle of the state. Christine Koulibaly.
Indeed, and while ensuring the development of human capital in 2024, yes, 2024, it should be remembered that we are summarizing the report on the state of the nation. Efforts, according to the head of government, have been sustained in the promotion of public health and the acceleration of the demographic transition. The increase in healthcare provision, the improvement in the supply and quality of education and training, the promotion of research and innovation, the strengthening and use of research results for economic transformation, women's empowerment. And in this regard, the Prime Minister pointed out that more than 2,500 youth projects were funded for an amount of more than 7.6 billion CFA francs. More than 9,500 positions were filled in the public administration in 2024. To this is added the operationalization of the emergency medical services and many other measures to make healthcare more accessible to the population.
Christine Koulibaly, the penultimate point of the 7 from the previous report on the state of the nation by Prime Minister Apollinaire Joachimson Kielem de Tambela, concerns the improvement of the living environment for Burkina Faso. This axis of government action is manifested by several achievements ranging from the clearing of land liabilities to the definition of new urban planning and housing policies, including access to drinking water, which is so important, and the construction of road infrastructure. For the current assessment, the Prime Minister will have things to say and show, notably with the Faso Mebo initiative, which is currently in full swing. It should be remembered it has become the Faso Mebo agency, which has recently been helping to change the face of the city of Ouagadougou and many other cities in Burkina, while opening up certain areas, but also by creating hundreds of jobs for the benefit of Burkina Faso youth.
So, Amadou Marcel Toué, it must be said that we are witnessing the arrival of the Prime Minister, head of government. This means that the presentation will be in a few moments. Only the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly is missing to make way for this constitutionalized accountability exercise. Amadou Marcel Toué. It should also be remembered, still within the framework of the report, the 2024 assessment, several activities were also carried out. As part of Burkina Faso's influence on the international stage, the head of government in his report stated that Burkina Faso has reaffirmed its leadership in diplomatic, cultural, and sporting arenas. And on the diplomatic front, Burkina Faso has strongly emphasized its sovereignist position and its vision of cooperation based on mutual respect with both its bilateral and multilateral partners. A communication offensive has also allowed Burkina Faso to deconstruct stereotypes and to mobilize its sincere partners, and especially its diaspora, to face these challenges. In the field of culture, Burkina Faso in 2024 once again successfully hosted major events such as the National Culture Week, FESPACO, and CIO, major gatherings that sent a message to the world of a resilient Burkina, a Burkina standing tall, ready to defend its sons and daughters. Sports were not left out of Burkina Faso's diplomatic influence. Among the activities, we have the International Cycling Tour of Faso. In addition, the head of government announced the participation of our athletes in 115 international competitions, resulting in over 250 medals brought back to the country.
There you go. Christine Koulibaly. We are not the official voices, but I think that from 2025 until now, many things have evolved. Since the last update on the state of the nation, the presentation by Prime Minister Apollinaire Joachim Kielem de Tambela here in the chamber, while waiting for him to revisit what happened in
2025, Amadou Maïga.
Indeed, it's certain that many things have evolved.
I must say, Amadou Maïga, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I was here at the time of his general policy statement during the first exercise of presenting on the state of the nation. And I am back again to mark this page of our history. And I think everything is ready here for the start of the accountability exercise, as we were saying earlier. The deputies are here, the members of the government, almost in full, are here. There are also representatives of the diplomatic and consular corps who are also present for the start of this activity. And we are waiting for the president of the Transitional Legislative Assembly for the start of the constitutional exercise.
So it should also be noted that the members of the Burkina Faso executive are here. All the ministers, or nearly all, we see the newly appointed ministers. We see the Minister of Sports, Anik Pikbougum.
Yes, Amadou Marcel To, we should recall that for this exercise, as announced earlier, it's an exercise followed by questions, but without a debate, as we often saw in the past. So that means it's the Prime Minister who comes to report on the government's actions, and the deputies have the right to ask clarifying questions, but it's not followed by a vote, a formal vote, it must be said. And in the schedule after the Prime Minister's presentation, we have a first break to certainly allow the Prime Minister to catch his breath, and then we return for the questions. And after this question phase, time is granted to the Prime Minister to find answers to the various questions and concerns raised here by the deputies. And then he prepares, another break is taken, he prepares for the answers before returning here to truly wrap up this accountability exercise. So Amadou Marcel To, it must be said that we're in for a full day here in the chamber.
So a marathon day, as we like to say in our jargon, well, there you go. One really must concentrate, stay alert, and remain attentive for long hours. And we hope to be up to the task.
And we have to be up to the task, Amadou Marcel too, and we're waiting to see what will fundamentally change in this accountability exercise, which will lead the Prime Minister. The figures will certainly evolve with the configuration of the new government, which clearly displays the vision of the popular progressive revolution. Many changes have taken place since his first visit, if only in the reconfiguration of the ministerial departments, suggesting the direction of government action. In any case, we're here waiting any moment now for the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly for the actual start of this exercise.
So we also hope for new figures regarding the fight against insecurity and terrorism as well. We also see what's being done in terms of development with many improvements, roads, school constructions, hospitals. We see that the revolution is underway.
Yes, indeed. For example, regarding the reconquest of the national territory, just recently I spoke with a high-ranking official, well, one from the military hierarchy. Often when we say, well, we've recovered more than 1% of the territory, it seems insignificant. But when you look closely, it's huge, because that's square kilometers reclaimed. That's arable land for Burkina Faso. That's people who are now thriving in their localities, and that's no small thing. And so by the end of 2025, we were at a bit more than 71% of the territory to be reclaimed, which means these are square kilometers now available for the agropastoral and fisheries offensive. When we consider the measures taken by the government to support populations resettled in their localities, to strengthen their resilience, to not only make them development actors, because it's true the government is working on their real socioeconomic recovery, but the government in its policies or through its policies is also making these internally displaced persons true development actors. And we were following this yesterday in our news reports. We saw in Titao certain crops that weren't cultivable, which are now a reality in Titao, like potatoes and wheat, even though it was an area a few months ago that was practically cut off from the rest of the country. This means the government is working on all levels of socio-economic development. So, Amadou Marcel, we are witnessing the arrival of the head, the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, which means this activity will begin at any moment now.
There's the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, Dr. Ousmane Bougouma, taking his seat, I think. He will start at any moment.
Indeed, and the plan is also to read the various relevant provisions governing this accountability exercise. Then the floor will be given to the head of government for this accountability exercise. I recall that last year the head of government was allotted a time of 1 hour and 30 minutes for his presentation. He went a bit over an hour and 30, about an hour and 40. So this year we're waiting to see how it goes and how things will unfold. In any case, everything is ready here for the start of the presentation on the state of the nation.
Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, Head of Government, Mr. President of the Constitutional Council, ladies and gentlemen, presidents of institutions, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, Mr. Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of diplomatic missions and consular posts, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of international and inter-African organizations, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, Mr. Governor, President of the Special Delegation of the Haut-Bassin, administrative, customary, and religious authorities, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, distinguished guests, the various tragic terrorist attacks carried out by unidentified armed men have brought deep mourning and sorrow to our country during the year 2025. In memory of the people, the defense and security forces, as well as the volunteers for the defense of the homeland who fell under the murderous bullets of terrorists, I ask you to observe a minute of silence. Thank you. On behalf of the national representation, I wish a speedy recovery to the injured. I also express all our compassion and our solidarity to the grieving families. Mr. Parliamentary Secretary, please proceed with the roll call of the deputies. Good morning, Excellency, and thank you for giving me the floor. I echo the protocol established by His Excellency, the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. I say good morning to everyone. Good morning, and I wish you a warm and cordial welcome to the Chamber for this morning's plenary session. Dear fellow deputies, we will now proceed with the roll call. Please answer present when your name is called. Mrs. Bayolo Asita Benedict Françoise Romaine. Présent. Mr. Balbonnet Boubacar. Present. Mrs. Bamoni Kansono Esther. Present. Mr. Bikinra Boubacar. Present. Mr. Bonzi Noeza. Present. Mr. Buguma Usman. Present. Mr. Koulibaly Sibiri. Present. Mr. Koulibaly Sie François d'Assise. Présent. Mr. Koulibaly Willow. Present. Madame Damir Yul Ine Inkuraba, present. Mr. Diallo Mumuni, absent with excuse. Proxy given to Mr. Yendidon Alan, present for him. Mr. Diallo Daouda, present. Mr. Diallo Ousmane, present. Madame Fofana Hawa, present. Mr. Gansore Marc Berthet. Mr. Jigemde Wenpuire Patrice Laurent, present. Mr. Guiti Lassina, present. Mr. Hammali, present. Mr. Hien Diedon Alain, present. Mr. Kabre Aboubakar, present. Mr. Kabre Khalifa, absent with excuse. Proxy given to Mr. Nasuri Daga. Mr. Kinda Michael, present. Mr. Kombasere Jean-Marie, present. Mr. Kone Diakalia, present. Mr. Kone Moussa, present. Mr. Kaidrissa, present. Mr. Lompo Dafidi David, present. Mr. Nana Basil, present. Mr. Nasuri Daga, present. Mr. Niandida, present. Mr. Nikema Wenyele Ambroise, present. Mr. Nombo Moussa, present. Mr. Ware Samadou, present. Mr. Ouedraogo Ali Badra, present. Madame Ouedraogo Compaoré Sabine, présent. Mr. Ouedraogo Irméan François, présent. Madame Ouedraogo Kandolo Linda Gladys, present. Madame Ouedraogo Kiswensida Geratou, present. Madame Ouedraogo Luglawande Clémence, présent. Mr. Ouedraogo Mahamadi, present. Mr. Ouedraogo Suleiman, present. Mr. Ouedraogo Yusuf, present. Mr. Salogo Mahmoudou, present. Mr. Sangare Moussa, present. Mr. Sanogo Drissa, present. Mr. Sano Yaya, present. Mr. Savadogo Pawende Edouard, present. Mr. Sawadogo Abdoulaye, present. Mr. Sawadogo Isidore Tegwende, present. Mr. Sawadogo Issa, present. Mr. Sawadogo Moussa, present. Madam Sidibe Mariam, present. Mr. Soma Abdoulaye, absent with excuse. Proxy given to Mr. Koulibaly Wileho. Mr. Some Yompon Ame, present. Mr. Soulama Ousseni, absent, excused. Proxy given to Mr. Koulibaly Sié François d'Assise. Présent. Mr. Tapsoba Isaka, present. Mr. Tapsoba L'Indésiré, absent, excused. Proxy given to Mr. Traoré Brema. Mr. Thiombiano Yempabu Faisal Harold, absent, excused. Proxy given to Mr. Nyandida, confirmed. Madam Tiendrebego Kalanzaga Marui Angel, present. Mr. Ternano Yentema Arno, present. Mr. Traoré Burema, present. Madame Traoré Ilgudo Anne-Marie Joseph, present. Madame Traoré Sephora Anita Sumai, absent, excused. Proxy given to Mr. Savadogo Pawende Edward, present, thank you. Mr. Toina Kanibe, present. Mr. Yaro Mamadou, present. Mr. Yelkuni Wenmana de Herman, present. Mr. Zangre François, présent. Mr. Zongo Kiswensida Evariste, present. Mr. Zongo Sayuba, present. Mr. Zungurana Daniel, present. Madam Zungurana Nemata Brigitte, present. Excellency, Mr. President, following the roll call of the deputies, we have absent. Excuse 7, proxy 7, absent without excuse 0, number of those present 64, number of voters 71. Have an excellent plenary session, everyone, and I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parliamentary Secretary. The Transitional Legislative Assembly still has a quorum to deliberate and to settle its agenda. Announcement. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly are informed that the Conference of Presidents meeting on Wednesday, January 28, 2026, has established a draft modified agenda for our permanent session. This draft agenda has been made available to you by the Legislative and Parliamentary Oversight Services. It is submitted for the Assembly's vote. Under Article 56, Paragraph 5 of our rules, I quote, "At the start of the session following the conference meeting, the President submits the draft agenda to the Transitional Legislative Assembly, which rules on the entire draft. No amendments are admissible. In the event of a vote, only the following may speak: the government and, for a 5-minute maximum explanation of vote, the committee chairpersons or their representatives who attended the conference, as well as 1 speaker per established group. I first give the floor to the government for any possible observations. Mr. Minister. Excellency, Mr. Speaker of Parliament, I thank the government. Do the chairpersons of the general committees wish to speak to provide explanations of their votes? Thank you. Finally, I invite any established groups that wish to do so to take the floor for a 5-minute maximum explanation of vote. Thank you. The amended agenda for the plenary session is adopted. It is so decided. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly are informed that there has been made available to them through the chairpersons of the established groups the analytical report of the plenary session of Tuesday, January 27, 2026, in accordance with the provisions of Article 58, Paragraph 4.
This analytical report is considered adopted. It will be published and posted online on the website of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, deputies, the agenda for this morning's plenary session is dedicated to the presentation by His Excellency Mr. Rimtalba Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo, Prime Minister, Head of Government, on the State of the Nation. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the Transitional Legislative Assembly is pleased to welcome you back to the chamber. On behalf of the national representation, I bid you welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, deputies, excellencies, prime ministers, ladies and gentlemen, members of the government, ladies and gentlemen, under the provisions of Article 109, paragraphs 2 and 3 of the Constitution, I quote, "The Prime Minister shall report directly to the deputies on the state of the nation." This presentation is followed by debates, but does not lead to a vote. End of quote. Likewise, under the provisions of Article 157 of the Rules of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, I quote, "At the beginning of each calendar year, the Prime Minister shall report directly to the transitional deputies on the state of the nation." End of quote. The presentation is followed by debates but does not lead to a vote. I would remind you, ladies and gentlemen, deputies, that following his appointment on Saturday, December 7th, 2024, His Excellency, Mr. Rimtalba Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo delivered his general policy statement in the chamber on Friday, December 27th, 2024, which was adopted by 71 votes in favor. The adoption of this statement confirmed the Prime Minister's inauguration into office in accordance with the provisions of Articles 63 of the Constitution and 156 of the Rules of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, your presentation this morning, the second after that of Friday, March 14th, 2025, is a highlight of our permanent session and of the life of our nation. This will be an opportunity for you to provide the deputies and the people of Burkina Faso with precise information on the state of the nation and the policy pursued by the government regarding the state of the nation, with a particular view to addressing the daily concerns of the Burkinabe people, for the smooth running of our country, and above all, for the reconquest of its territorial integrity, the restoration of peace and social cohesion. I wish to inform His Excellency the Prime Minister and all the deputies that in application of the provisions of Article 158 of our rules, I quote, "The debate shall proceed under the following conditions. 1 hour maximum for the Prime Minister's presentation. 2 hours maximum for questions from the deputies. 2 hours maximum for the Prime Minister's responses. The chairpersons of the established groups shall transmit to the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly the questions from deputies that have not received a response or have received an incomplete response, so that he may remind the Prime Minister, who will then respond." End of quote. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Excellency, Mr. President, honorable deputies, dear comrades, it is a pleasant duty for me to present before your august assembly the report on the state of the nation. When good governance goes hand in hand with accountability, and when this becomes a constitutional obligation, this solemn occasion arises, this annual meeting where the executive accounts for its management to the people. I submit to this Republican exercise at a historic moment when the popular progressive revolution was proclaimed, with courage and determination by the head of state, Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traore, thus marking a new era for our dear homeland and putting an end to speculations regarding its ideological and political orientation. This revolution carried by the Burkinabe people is irreversibly taking root in the depths of our society. It embodies our common will to build a Burkina Faso of peace, freedom, equity, social justice, and shared development for all. With conviction, we have decided to break with the neoliberal model that feeds on the predation of our resources. We have turned our backs on these one-way partnerships to build a sovereign Burkina Faso anchored in its own values and master of its own destiny.
This revolutionary struggle, we are leading it thanks to the patriotic commitment of the daughters and sons of our nation, committed in solidarity with the peoples of Mali and Niger to make the Confederation of Sahel States a space of freedom, of dignity, and of sovereignty. For more than a decade now, in our cities, as in our countryside, brave women and men fight, sometimes even to the point of the ultimate sacrifice, so that freedom may live on the land of our fathers. That is why, at the start of this exercise, I salute with great deference all components of the National Armed Forces, all internal security forces, the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, whose commitment, bravery, and determination constitute the foundation of the reconquest and securing of our lands, and thus make possible our aspiration for sovereignty. Mr. President, honorable deputies, as the world sinks into a cycle of instability, as the global geopolitical context is characterized by pockets of tension and conflict that destabilize the world economy and challenge the established orders, Burkina Faso is advancing valiantly on the path of its development and the restoration of the integrity of its territory. The struggle of Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traoré, head of state, to raise the awareness of the Burkinabe people and free them from colonial alienation is yielding perceptible and undeniable achievements in all fields. Mr. President, honorable deputies, on the occasion of my general policy statement on December 27th, 2024, I committed the government to providing answers to the legitimate aspirations of the Burkinabe people. Under the leadership and determination of Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traoré, head of state, these aspirations are driven by a clear vision, that of making Burkina Faso a sovereign country in all spheres of its existence. The time when we took the leisure of waiting for a protector, of hoping for the support of a guide, is over. We are acting now by ourselves and for ourselves, banishing all mimicry to get off the beaten track and channel our energies toward renewal for Burkina Faso. By proclaiming the progressive popular revolution and advocating an endogenous development model, the head of state, Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traoré, invites every citizen to have a high sense of duty toward our dear homeland, Burkina Faso. It is in this context that government action has refocused on the following areas: the restoration and strengthening of security, the strengthening of national solidarity and social cohesion, the development of human capital at the service of the people, the promotion of economic sovereignty, and the development of a sovereign diplomacy. Mr. President, the defense of the homeland stands as the primary front of the people's progressive revolution. Thus, during the year 2025, national defense and security were marked by the continued reconquest of the territory, the strengthening of human and material resources, and the fight against organized crime and financial delinquency. The intensification of reconquest actions through several emblematic military operations has made it possible to destroy several terrorist strongholds and to put the enemy to flight in many localities, thus favoring full control of nearly 74% of the territory. The exploits of our valiant fighters have led to the reopening of 73 prefectures and town halls, more than 600 educational structures, 38 health facilities, as well as the liberation and resettlement of 442 villages. As we perform this exercise, many other localities have been reconquered and are currently being consolidated. Despite the treachery of the terrorists and the atrocity of their actions against peaceful populations, our fighting forces have always acted with professionalism and in strict respect for human life. The strengthening of personnel has continued with the recruitment and training of 16,000 soldiers of all profiles, 2,000 police officers, and nearly 15,000 VDPs. In terms of military training, we have reached a decisive turning point. From now on, our strategic level officers are trained on our soil according to our own war doctrine, rooted in our realities. This strategic vision has materialized through the opening of the Tiefo Amoro Higher Military Education Institute and the creation of the Higher Institute of Aeronautics of Bobo Dioulasso. This institute is intended to provide training for pilots and aeronautical technicians in a civil-military approach. In the coming weeks, this cutting-edge training school will recruit its first class of student pilots who will be fully trained in Burkina Faso by Burkinabe instructors. These achievements have been reinforced by a significant improvement, both quantitative and qualitative, in military equipment acquired through the patriotic commitment and exemplary mobilization of the entire Burkinabe people. This is an opportunity for me to praise the patriotic spirit of the worthy daughters and sons of our country, as well as the friends of Burkina Faso, who have strongly supported the government's initiatives, making it possible to mobilize in 2025 more than 222 billion CFA francs for the Patriotic Support Fund, compared to 175 billion in 2024. Since its launch in 2022, this initiative has made it possible to mobilize more than 496 billion CFA francs for national defense and strategic projects. Furthermore, the government has paid special attention to strengthening the support mechanisms and health and psychosocial care for wounded fighters and people affected by terrorism. To this end, it provides care for orphans, wards of the nation, and training for widows in income-generating activities. Honorable members, the tours carried out in the reconquered areas by the ministers and myself have allowed us to witness the moral strength, solidarity, and spirit of resistance of the people, the true pillar of our collective victory. The head of state, in his New Year's message to the nation, set the course in this regard. He stressed that efforts to reconquer the territory will continue with the rise in power of the fighting forces, the consolidation of reconquered areas, the development of a defense industry, and the strengthening of strategic partnerships. A special emphasis will be placed on the reorganization of the VDP brigade, now raised to the rank of an army. Ladies and gentlemen, major reforms have been undertaken to strengthen internal security. The coverage of the territory by security services has resulted in the implementation of areas of jurisdiction for the National Police and the National Gendarmerie, with the elimination of 107 duplicate security services. Efforts have also led to the operationalization of sector police stations, mobile police stations, a motorized security and intervention brigade, 4 anti-crime brigades, and 14 Republican security companies. These concrete actions have effectively brought security services closer to the population. The creation of the Labal Brigade with the operationalization of the Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso brigades has contributed to improving civic-mindedness, discipline, and public order. In a technological innovation approach to internal security challenges, a national online reporting platform for cybercrime acts has been set up, as well as a drone accident reporting system. The very soon modernization of the road control system through the e-fine and video fine system will not only improve road safety and the collection of fixed fines, but will also contribute to limiting the occurrence of acts of corruption. Mr. President, the fight against major crime has continued relentlessly, with more than 98,000 security patrols conducted by the FDS, particularly in border strips and in areas with high security challenges. These operations have allowed for the consolidation of reconquered areas and the securing of resettled people. The dismantling of criminal networks through the arrest of several individuals and the seizure of thousands of motorcycles, large quantities of fuel, narcotics, and cash. Mr. President, in 2025, our people once again demonstrated the strength of their solidarity and their exceptional capacity for resilience. Despite the difficulties, Burkinabe people have supported and encouraged their internally displaced brothers and sisters to meet their essential needs with dignity. Thus, more than 22,000 tons of food and over 290 tons of medicine were delivered to areas facing security challenges. Nearly 59,000 internally displaced households, including returnees, received essential household items. More than 18,000 households received emergency shelter. Thousands of internally displaced pupils and students were supported by scholarships and various aids, allowing them to continue their schooling. In the effort to encourage the return of populations to their original localities, now liberated and secured, the government has strengthened recovery and resettlement support actions. In this regard, over 16,300 breeding stocks of small ruminants, nearly 6,400 tons of improved seeds for various crops, nearly 900 tons of fertilizer, and various other agropastoral production materials and equipment were provided to resettled populations. As of December 31st, 2025, the combined efforts of various stakeholders enabled the return and resettlement of 1,160,935 people across 871 original localities. Honorable members, in the effort to rebuild the social fabric, the government continued its efforts in 2025 by relying on active forces and our traditional values of solidarity to revive the sense of belonging to a nation and strengthen living together. To encourage and better monitor religious practices and discourse, the government mapped pilgrimage sites and began the process of adopting the law on religious freedoms. The recent adoption of the law on the status of traditional and customary leadership paves the way for the establishment of endogenous conflict management mechanisms. Furthermore, the formal adoption by your esteemed and august assembly, which took place on January 14th, of the Faso-Bukare law, clearly confirms this strong desire to make use of traditional and customary dispute resolution mechanisms. These mechanisms, which enjoy great trust and broad public support, are highly valued by the community. Mr. President, the effective realization of the revolution's ideals and the structural transformation of our economy require competent and healthy human resources, fully mobilized and capable of supporting national development projects. In this regard, the government has resolutely pursued reforms of the education system, the employment sector, the health system, the living environment, and social protection. Regarding education, training curricula and course materials have been revised notably with the generalization of vocational initiation, the teaching of English in all classes, the progressive introduction of information and communication technologies, and the institution of civic and patriotic training. Concretely, preschool and primary structures have benefited from over 2,500,000 basic school kits, nearly 1,900,000 new textbooks, and specific support for more than 25,000 vulnerable students or those with disabilities. The exclusive use of locally sourced products in the community canteens has been further strengthened, and nearly 3,500,000 individual rations have now been carefully prepared and served. In 2025, 1,450 billion CFA francs, or more than 40% of the budget, were devoted to education and health, with notably 11.79% for the health sector and 28.34% for the education sector. These enormous investments made year after year in human capital will allow our country to improve the health of the population, acquire new skills, boost its productivity, innovation, and economic growth, and prepare its youth for more qualified jobs. In technical and vocational education, the objective is to increase the number of learners and adapt training to the needs of the national economy. To this end, centers of excellence, vocational training centers specialized in agri-food processing, as well as training hubs in heavy machinery, mechanics, and industrial maintenance have been created to support the sector of mining and defense. On the pedagogical level, 45 vocational training programs, 20 training and certification frameworks, 49 technical and vocational education and training manuals have been developed. Honorable deputies, the development of human capital obliges us to answer the following question. What Burkinabe of tomorrow do we desire for our dear homeland? Faced with the crisis of values that has become worrying, the government is working to build Burkinabe citizens who are responsible, respectful of their duties and obligations, and fully committed to meeting the challenges of development. All these concerns have led to the institution of mandatory patriotic immersion and the Faso-Mebo holiday camps. The head of state put it so well: the revolution needs new citizens, patriots, people of integrity, solidarity, and we cannot lead the fight against imperialism without an awakened and conscious youth. The patriotic immersion took place in 29 localities and brought together more than 59,000 new graduates who were taught the basics for facing life. Related to entrepreneurship, civic values, patriotism, and civic engagement, the issues, the geopolitical issues, ideology and development, social cohesion, and intercommunity relations. The Faso-Mebo holiday camps were an extension of the School of Life. They are part of the national rebuilding dynamic which places youth at the heart of building a more united and resilient Burkina Faso. The first edition of the Faso-Mebo holiday camp brought together 910 children in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, and the results exceeded our expectations. Ladies and gentlemen, in higher education, major actions have been taken. notably to reduce delays and normalize academic years in public higher education and research institutions. To date, academic years have been normalized for 92.52% of programs. Efforts have also led to the launch of construction work on 40 modern lecture halls, the rehabilitation of the Central University Library of Joseph Kizerbo University, and the completion of construction on 2 open digital spaces in Ouagadougou. The complete digitalization of orientation and registration procedures for new graduates, the establishment of the National Plant Genetic Resources Bank, the adoption of the university map, the reform of the specifications for private higher education institutions, and the institution of the National Ranking Exam in Health Sciences and the probationary exam are notable advances recorded that will sustainably improve the offer and quality of higher education. Mr. President, regarding the increase in health services, the operationalization of the new Pala University Hospital Center and the Radiotherapy Center in Bobo Dioulasso were major events in 2025. As part of the Presidential Health Initiative, 25 health and social promotion centers were transformed into communal centers, and construction work on 5 anesthesia and intensive care departments has been launched. Regarding the strengthening of human resources, the 1,000 times 5 plan allowed for the recruitment of more than 2,000 paramedics and more than 1,700 general practitioners. For specialization in 53 medico-surgical specialties, 171 pharmacists in 16 pharmaceutical specialties, and 40 dental surgeons in 15 dental surgery specialties. Ultimately, this plan will strengthen the availability of specialized human resources in national healthcare facilities. The government has also continued efforts to strengthen hospital technical facilities, enabling the performance of advanced surgical procedures such as kidney transplantation for the first time. Additionally, the hemodialysis center at the Gawa Regional Hospital Center has been inaugurated. The emergency medical aid services in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso are operational, strengthening urgent care for the population and reducing the risk of death. Furthermore, the operationalization of the Center for Traditional Medicine and Integrated Care continued with the launch of units, notably the Traditional Care Unit and the Phytomedicine Production Unit. Finally, the continuous improvement of technical facilities. To continuously improve technical facilities, the government, under the Presidential Health Initiative, will launch the Burkina Faso Heart Institute construction project in 2026. This is a hospital center specializing in the management of cardiovascular diseases and cardiac surgery. This institute will be dedicated to care, research, teaching, prevention, rehabilitation, as well as the evaluation of new technologies in cardiac surgery and cardiology. The ambition is to significantly improve the availability and quality of care for cardiovascular disease management in Burkina Faso. Honorable members of Parliament, strengthening the social protection of our populations remains a major challenge for the government. In this regard, actions have been implemented for vulnerable populations, notably the granting of school scholarships to orphans of CARFO pensioners. And the CNSS, the funding of 102 projects for laid-off and retired workers, and nearly 175,000 people enrolled in the Universal Health Insurance Scheme, of which 31,441 will benefit from first phase services starting this first quarter of 2026. Improving public administration to serve the people required the recruitment of 10,150 new agents. To improve public service efficiency and better manage staffing levels, the government has introduced attendance checks, adopted a priority clause to serve the state, and proceeded with job descriptions in most ministries. Regarding the modernization of administration and working conditions, the government has submitted to your August Assembly a bill to revise the labor code, the result of consultation with social partners. It has also launched a vast operation to authenticate the diplomas and professional qualifications of public officials, starting with members of the government. This operation, now established, will lend credibility to the diplomas and professional qualifications issued in Burkina Faso. Finally, the Commission for the Regulation of Malfunctions, which was operationalized during the year 2025, produced the first exhaustive diagnosis by mapping more than 4,400 malfunctions deemed critical in 27 ministries and institutions. In 2026, the government will provide response plans to these malfunctions that harm the quality of services to the people. Ladies and gentlemen, reforms in the field of justice have been deepened with the adoption of the Persons and Family Code, the Penal Code, the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Law on Judicial Organization, with a view to adapting justice to our sociocultural realities and bringing it closer to the citizen. Furthermore, in application of the law on community service, the application of the law on community service has allowed for the placement of 6,406 inmates, thus reducing prison overcrowding by 7.96% and contributing to the realization of community interest activities. Regarding the financial accessibility of justice, legal aid has been granted to 1,806 vulnerable or indigent people, including 429 women and 35 minors. In terms of access to justice, the Operation Empty Record has allowed for the trial of over 8,000 criminal cases in just 55 days, far exceeding the annual average of 7,000 cases. The digitalization of judicial procedures continues with the development of new platforms in 2026. Honorable Deputy, what model of economic development must we invent for ourselves? This is the question we must ask ourselves today, after the failure of the neoliberal economy that has been imposed on us for over 4 decades. Neoliberal rhetoric has consisted of making us believe that the state should not interfere in development issues and that the production of goods and services is the sole responsibility of the private sector. This rhetoric led us to privatize public companies, to eliminate certain subsidies, and to establish budgetary austerity, contributing to the restructuring of the public productive sector. For a state to fully play its sovereign role, it needs sovereignty over the fundamental levers of its development. We are on this path, and we will achieve it together with the committed Burkinabe people. Today, I can reassure you that the national economy remains solid and resilient, facing internal constraints and external shocks with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture constitutes the vital foundation of our economy and one of the major pillars of our fight for national sovereignty. This strategic orientation is driven by the Agropastoral and Fisheries Offensive and by the Presidential Initiative for Agricultural Production and Food Self-Sufficiency. The 2025-2026 Agropastoral campaign recorded a national cereal production estimated at over 7 million tons, bringing the coverage rate of cereal needs to 126.6%, a historic surplus level for our country. Rice production reached over 1 million tons, representing an increase of 49.34% compared to the 2024-2025 campaign. These tangible results are the fruit of the development and rehabilitation of more than 35,000 hectares of irrigated perimeters and lowlands, free or subsidized plowing of more than 51,000 hectares, reinforced support for producers, the subsidy of nearly 70,000 tons of fertilizer, as well as the distribution of more than 12,000 tons of improved seeds. In 2025, efforts continued to strengthen livestock farming and fisheries production. In this regard, more than 8,000 tons of concentrated feed were produced and made available to stakeholders in the sector. 7 million head of cattle and small ruminants, as well as more than 18 million head of poultry, were vaccinated. More than 5,600 hectares of pastoral zones were registered and 200 hectares of fodder crops were developed. Also, the installation of 1,185 floating cages, the production of more than 104 million fingerlings, and the establishment of 500 private fish production promoters have made it possible to reach a production of more than 53,000 tons of fish, including more than 17,000 in floating cages, thus creating sustainable jobs and new sources of income. Despite these performances, the government remains aware that challenges persist, and the year 2026 will be one of consolidating achievements. Our objective is clear: to sustainably feed the people of Burkina Faso through their own efforts and make agriculture a driver of growth, employment, and sovereignty. Mr. President, water is a strategic resource at the heart of life, production, and social stability. The efforts deployed have improved secure access to drinking water for more than 1,300,000 people in Burkina Faso. Thanks to the completion of more than 3,500 drinking water supply structures and the commissioning of nearly 40,000 private connections. Achievements also included, among others, the construction of 81 boreholes equipped with human-powered pumps, and more than 4,200 family and community latrines to support the voluntary return of internally displaced persons. Added to this is the completion of more than 25,000 family latrines and more than 1,500 institutional and community latrines, as well as public toilets for the benefit of more than 250,000 people. For the restoration of the vegetation cover, more than 12 million plants, mainly medicinal, were planted and nearly 200 conservation areas were created. The battle for water remains a strategic struggle for the ecological and economic resilience of our nation. The year 2026 will be dedicated to the pursuit of universal and continuous access to drinking water and sanitation, as well as the strengthening of sustainable management of forest and wildlife resources. Honorable members, the mining and energy sector recorded significant progress in 2025 towards increased sovereignty and better utilization of national resources. The government is determinedly pursuing mining governance reforms to strengthen state participation, local content, and transparency. In 2025, national gold production exceeded 94 tons, with nearly 43 from artisanal and semi-mechanized mining. This performance generated budget revenues of over 776 billion CFA francs as of December 31st, 2025. The sector contributed more than 85 billion CFA francs to the Mining Development Fund. The resolute fight against fraud and illegal mining has secured additional revenues estimated at over 100 billion CFA francs. Furthermore, the Burkina Mining Participation Company is a key player, with the state transferring 11 mining assets to it to relaunch strategic sites like Perkwa, Inata, and Kire, Kalsaka, Tambao, and Taparko. Additionally, 34 industrial quarries were commissioned, including 22 for granite, 4 for tuff, and 6 for dolomitic limestone. In energy, national capacity was boosted by commissioning thermal and solar plants in several areas and electrifying 125 new rural areas via the national grid and 6 via solar mini-grids, connecting over 160,500 new subscribers, and continuing the nuclear power plant project reflect the government's commitment to ensuring accessible and sovereign energy. This year, 2026, we will launch a presidential initiative focused on water and energy to provide these resources to the people wherever there is a need. Ladies and gentlemen, opening up regions remains a strategic lever for socio-economic development and territorial integration. In 2025, the government built nearly 102 kilometers of paved national roads, over 70 kilometers of paved urban roads, 92 kilometers of rehabilitated roads, 697 kilometers of rural tracks, and several crossings. 3 modern toll stations were commissioned in Tintilou, Bontenga, and Cotedougou. Construction work on the Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso Highway will continue, and the paving of several other road axes will be launched. In terms of urban mobility, besides opening new bus lines following the acquisition of 530 buses, pre-feasibility studies for a metro system in the 2 main urban centers, which are Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, will be initiated. Air transport has been consolidated and strengthened by the acquisition of a new aircraft for the benefit of the airline Air Burkina, and by the creation of the Faso Airports Company, whose mission is to drive a structural reorganization of air transport in our country. Regarding urbanization and housing, notable progress has been recorded with the production of over 18,800 plots in Fadangurma, Bobo Dioulasso, Ouagadougou, Orodara, Garango, Saaba, and Komsilga, and the construction of over 1,300 housing units in several cities. The launch of major real estate projects such as the Zafara Plaza complex, which sets the tone for a true ambition to modernize our cities, which continues inexorably. Efforts will continue to improve the population's access to decent housing. For the year 2026, the government will ensure the construction of at least 1,000 social and affordable housing units as part of the 50,000 housing units construction program. Mr. President, the welfare state has shown its limits. How can we lead the people to build by themselves and for themselves This is what justifies the Faso-Mebo presidential initiative in order to provide appropriate responses to the concerns of Burkinabe citizens regarding accessibility and urbanization. Faso-Mebo is this innovative vision that draws from the endogenous approach to national development. It is a jewel for the nation and a source of pride for every Burkinabe. It unifies initiatives for building the homeland through the opportunity it offers everyone to contribute their part. I am delighted by the enthusiasm of the Burkinabe and the Friends of Burkina Faso in their vast majority for this presidential initiative, proof that they have understood its essence, which aims to lead them to take charge of their destiny, that of building our cities and villages. This is an opportunity for me to convey the government's heartfelt thanks to the builders, both famous and anonymous, who change the face of our country every day. It escapes no one's notice that Faso-Mebo is setting an example for the rest of the world and drawing admiration. In 2026, Faso-Mebo will be deployed in the different regions to accelerate accessibility, reduce logistics costs, and strengthen territorial integration. Honorable deputies, the strengthening of our economic fabric has been marked by a major industrial offensive with the inauguration of 11 new industrial units, including SN Brafaso, the Burkina Kaju Company, Sofacor for the production of absorbent cotton, Faso Gulgo, Faso Kosam, and the establishment of 4 thematic industrial parks for textiles, leather and hides, cashew, and shea. These structural investments, totaling more than 66 billion CFA francs, have led to the creation of over 660 permanent jobs. Our handicraft sector, a true pillar of our culture, saw the completion of the construction and equipping of the National Support Center for Artisanal Cotton Processing and the successful organization of the 5th edition of the Regional Handicraft Fair in Tenkodogo. In the trade sector, our priority has been consumer protection and support for strategic sectors. And to this end, more than 570 food and non-food manufacturing units were subject to inspections. And more than 28,000 actors were inspected as part of the fight against fraud. The dynamism of our private sector resulted in the creation of more than 25,200 new businesses and the issuance of 69 approvals under the Investment Code, thus testifying to the renewed confidence of investors in our economy. Also, to stimulate real estate investment and job creation, the law requiring large companies to build a headquarters in Burkina Faso has been adopted. And to date, it concerns more than 800 large companies. Mr. President, the year 2026 will be one of consolidation and innovation. Our priorities will focus on the operationalization of new companies, notably the Faso Rail Integrated Railway Industrial Complex, the Texforce Textile Unit, and the state-owned company Fasoyar. Honorable deputies, whenever the head of state has had the opportunity, he calls upon the inventive genius of the Burkinabe people. I would like to invite all stakeholders here to give the highest importance to this solemn appeal. If in the past some Burkinabe inventions did not receive the necessary support and guidance, today we are fortunate to have a leader ready to invest in everything related to inventions and discoveries that allow our country to no longer depend on the rest of the world. Honorable deputies, Burkina Faso remains resolutely committed to its digital transition, established as a strategic lever for socio-economic development. The progress made in network deployment, the digitization of procedures, and the modernization of the administration reflect a clear desire to build a modern and sovereign state. The reforms undertaken in this sector are dear to the Comrade President of Faso because they effectively help reduce corrupt practices. The actions taken have allowed for the deployment and activation of telephone and internet services in 441 sites, including 126 in rural areas. The launch of the deployment and activation of telephone and internet services in 750 new rural localities to accelerate the completion of the Zero Dead Zone project in Burkina Faso by 2027. The government has taken a strong step toward digital sovereignty by building 2 data centers that have just been put into service. Their operationalization greatly increases the current hosting and data storage capacity of the public administration. Honorable members of Parliament, communication, culture, tourism, and sport are essential vectors for resilience, national unity, and international influence. The reforms undertaken and the infrastructure built testify to Burkina Faso's ambition to assert itself with dignity and confidence as a nation standing tall, proud of its identity, and responsible for its destiny. As part of the implementation of the wartime communication strategy, the government has made the efforts of the fighting forces more visible and its actions more understandable. This has resulted in the production of over 7,000 audiovisual, written, and digital works related to the fight against terrorism, disinformation, and fake news, as well as several field trips by journalists to recaptured localities. Faced with stereotypes, the government took the initiative to produce and distribute a memorandum to deconstruct clichés and misconceptions and present the true dynamic of Burkina Faso, that of a resilient people committed to the path of security and development. Burkina Faso remains attractive in terms of tourism and culture. Arrivals at tourist accommodation establishments saw an increase of 1.3% compared to 2024, with a significant share of domestic tourists, namely 78%. As for visits to tourist sites, they recorded an increase of 177% in 2025. The sector's attractiveness has been strengthened with the inauguration of the Thomas Sankara Mausoleum and the establishment of the military tribute ceremony called Sankara Lives On, which draws tourists to this site every first Thursday of the month. 2025 also saw the successful organization of major cultural events, such as FESPACO, which crowned Burkinabe talent with Dani Kouyaté winning the Golden Stallion of Yenenga. In the drive to strengthen cultural sovereignty, the Burkinabe Agency for Cinema and Audiovisual Media has been operationalized to promote and safeguard our audiovisual and cinematographic heritage. Support for film production totaling 1 billion CFA francs has been granted to the industry's stakeholders. The sports sector is a lever for growth. Investments made in this sector have allowed for the completion and CAF certification of the August 4th Stadium and the ongoing construction of the Iguema Stadium in Bobo, Dioulasso, as well as the organization of the 37th edition of the Tour du Faso cycling race with Burkina Faso's victory. This momentum will continue in 2026 with the construction of 5 sports academies. I take this opportunity to congratulate all our athletes and sports people who, in 2025, won 481 medals across 108 international competitions. Mr. President, honorable members of Parliament, the year 2025 ended with positive macroeconomic indicators. With the security challenge increasingly under control, our economy has shown remarkable dynamism. The economic growth rate is approximately 6.5% in 2025 compared to 4.8% in 2024, reflecting the resilience of the national economy. Thanks to the government's efforts in price control and the effectiveness of support policies for the productive sector, our economy is experiencing deflation of around 0.5% in 2025 compared to inflation of 4.20% in 2024. In terms of foreign trade, we have reached a historic milestone. Thanks to the promotion of the private sector and the reorganization of the mining sector, Burkina Faso shows a historic surplus in its trade balance of over 1,975 billion CFA francs in 2025. Honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, the final amounts of revenue collected for the state budget are over 3,309 billion in 2025, compared to 3,019 billion in 2024. This reflects a constant effort to improve revenue. This performance is the result of ambitious structural reforms and the accelerated digitalization of public finances, with the deployment of several digital solutions, including Faso Arzeka, a multi-channel platform enabling secure collection of public revenue. The budget deficit has shown a downward trend, falling from 568.3 billion CFA francs in 2024 to 462 billion in 2025. Honorable Member of Parliament, regarding public procurement, the government has taken regulatory measures and developed a single window platform for public contracts, making it possible to obtain all required administrative documents. Furthermore, the ongoing development of the eBurkindi platform will allow for the digitalization of procurement and execution procedures for public contracts. The consolidation of this exemplary financial mobilization commits the government, starting in 2026, to accelerate the full digitalization of the revenue chain and the land registry, to broaden the tax base, and to improve fiscal yield. To this end, the launch of the certified electronic invoice during the month of January constitutes an important step towards the transparency of commercial operations and the modernization of business management. The progress recorded was made possible thanks to the support and the sense of civic duty and patriotism of the actors in the economic world, to whom I address my encouragement. In the context of the revolution, the government invites corporate citizens to show more commitment and to integrate continuous work 24 hours a day as an option and an innovation. Honorable Member of Parliament, the government initiated in 2025 courageous measures to rationalize public spending and reduce the state's lifestyle. To better align them with national priorities and improve the well-being of Burkinabe people. These measures have saved 478 million CFA francs on water, electricity, and telecommunications expenses, 621 million CFA francs on administrative leases and institutional rationalization through the abolition or reform of low-value-added structures. As an illustration, we can mention the abolition of the Independent National Electoral Commission and the grouping of 14 national funds into 4 large funds. These efforts, which will continue in 2026, reflect a requirement for consistency and exemplarity. The state is reforming itself in order to better serve the people and to free up budgetary margins for the benefit of social sectors and structural investments. The latest government reshuffle is part of this logic of transformation. It has established the reduction in the number of ministerial departments, and for some of them, the adoption of new names that are as evocative as they are committed. Among them, we can mention the Ministry of War and Patriotic Defense, the Ministry of Servants of the People, the Ministry of Nation Building, and the Ministry of Family and Solidarity. These truly revolutionary titles clearly reflect the head of state's strong desire to breathe new life into our nation's institutions and to remain in tune with the genuine aspirations of the people. Far from being a mere publicity stunt, this change assigns a clear and demanding mission to every sector. These involve, respectively, resolutely waging war and defending our national territory, to genuinely serve the people by responding with respect, consideration, and dedication to the citizens' needs, and to build infrastructure capable of sustainably improving the quality of life for Burkinabe people. And finally, to move away from dependency and sustainable humanitarian aid to achieve a true national social recovery. Honorable members of Parliament, the fight against financial crime is no longer just an administrative necessity, but an act of sovereignty and a struggle for economic liberation. In this regard, over 3,300 companies have undergone tax audits, leading to the actual recovery of more than 47 billion francs. CFA, more than 28,000 economic actors, as well as 473 industrial companies, were audited as part of the fight against commercial fraud and anti-competitive practices. Substantial seizures were carried out, including more than 2,165 tons of shea nuts. 1,850 deposit accounts of ministries and institutions were audited to combat financial embezzlement. Furthermore, the defense of the state's interest by the State Judicial Agency has prevented financial penalties, amounting to 21 billion CFA francs and recovered 16 billion CFA francs. Efforts to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism have intensified and led to the removal of Burkina Faso from the Financial Action Task Force's Grey List on October 24, 2025, thus improving the financial stability and international standing of our country. Moreover, a new law on freedom of association was passed with the aim of cleaning up the non-profit sector and improving the fight against money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, regarding local development, the government's achievements have allowed for the adaptation of the legal framework for decentralization to socio-cultural realities, for a better organization of the territory, in the sense of strengthening the administrative and security network, the government proceeded in 2025 to create 6 new administrative districts, namely 4 regions and 2 provinces, and to change the names of the regions. This reform aims to better reflect our socio-cultural and linguistic realities. From now on, each administrative district bears a local name, thus serving as a vehicle to promote our authenticity, our history, and our indigenous values. The adoption on December 30th, 2023, of the new law on the General Code of Territorial Communities by your August Assembly allows the country to have a strategic tool to promote popular participation and guarantee equitable and harmonious development of localities. Honorable members of Parliament, no sovereignty or sustainable development can prosper without effective control of land. In the logic of improving land management and asserting the state's leadership over the national land domain, the law on agrarian and land reorganization was adopted and establishes the state's full and complete ownership of the national land domain. The continuation of actions to secure the land and cadastral domain has made it possible to digitize more than 186,000 cadastral references, to evaluate more than 1,500 plots in the cadastre, to geo-reference the plans of 13 localities, and to register 245 plots of land belonging to the state. In 2023, special attention will be paid to land tenure security for growth poles, the design and deployment of a land information system, as well as the securing of 300 state-owned lands and its subdivisions. Furthermore, the operation to monitor land development will continue, and undeveloped lands will be subject to an additional tax. The goal of this reform is to combat land speculation, promote balanced urban development, and make land a lever for development. Mr. President, honorable members of Parliament, under the leadership of Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traore, President of Faso, our diplomacy has ceased to be a diplomacy of convenience to become a diplomacy of affirmation of our sovereignty, aligned with the deep aspirations of the popular masses. History will remember that in the face of hypocrisy and contempt, the peoples of the Sahel chose unity. The cornerstone of our regional policy in 2025 has been the deepening of the fraternal and strategic alliance with Mali and Niger within the Confederation of Sahel States. This architecture has become the main framework for our collective security, our integrated development, and our diplomatic affirmation. Structural progress, both institutionally and strategically, has been recorded with the adoption of additional protocols to the founding treaty of the AES, thus strengthening the coordination of our diplomatic action, our common defense, our development policies, and the orientations of Parliament. Mr. President, your leadership as head of the Burkinabe Parliament, alongside your counterparts from Mali and Niger, has led to the adoption of the additional protocol relating to the confederal sessions of parliaments, and I congratulate you on this. The trust placed in the Comrade President of Faso by his peers during the second session of the College of Heads of State on December 23, 2025 in Bamako, to assume the presidency of the Confederation is a major success and commits our country to raising high the voice of the peoples of the Sahel and to make the AES a secure confederal space with regained sovereignty. The launch of the unified AES force constitutes a decisive step towards securing our common space and embodies our unwavering will to take charge of our security destiny. Thanks to permanent consultations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are increasingly speaking with one and the same voice on regional and international issues, thus multiplying our influence and our credibility. Our international voice has become the faithful reflection of our deep aspirations. To date, the AES passport and biometric identification card are a reality within the confederal space. To this is added the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, the Confederal Television and Radio, which broadcast respectively from Bamako and Ouagadougou. Honorable members of Parliament, our country has courageously taken major sovereign decisions on the international stage while respecting its commitments. These choices are welcomed by our people because they meet a simple requirement. Never again will Burkina Faso be a testing ground or a state under trusteeship. In consultation with our brothers of the AES, we have taken the sovereign decision to withdraw from the International Organization of La Francophonie in February 2025 and from the International Criminal Court in September 2025. These organizations had become instruments of neo-colonial domination in the hands of imperialists. We have also applied the principle of reciprocity to our partners whenever necessary, because we remain convinced that a fruitful partnership is always based on mutual respect. Furthermore, Burkina Faso's notable participation in the 80th United Nations General Assembly was an opportunity to strongly reaffirm our commitment to equitable multilateralism and respect for the right of peoples to self-determination. This is the place for me to reaffirm Burkina Faso's commitment to a world based on rules that must be respected by all. In accordance with the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter, notably, the sovereign equality of states, the peaceful settlement of international disputes, non-interference in the internal affairs of states, and cooperation. Honorable members of Parliament, the diversification of partnerships undertaken by the government has made it possible to break the circles of dependence, open new horizons, and strengthen Burkina Faso's capacity to finance its own development. Indeed, we have established diplomatic relations with Kyrgyzstan and signed political consultation agreements with Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Hungary, and Serbia. These new bridges open up unprecedented prospects for cooperation. Diversification has also allowed for a deepening of strategic partnerships with the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the People's Republic of China, Turkey, Ghana, the Kingdom of Morocco, and the Kingdom of Oman. Honorable members of Parliament, Burkinabés abroad have never broken the link with the motherland. In addition to current transfers amounting to more than 200 billion CFA francs, their contribution to national development was reflected in 2025 by the mobilization of nearly 494 million CFA francs for the Patriotic Support Fund. This represents more than a quarter of voluntary contributions. The introduction of free visas for all Africans is a strong act of Pan-Africanism, of commitment to continental integration, and of Burkina Faso's openness to African peoples. Guided by this spirit, Burkina Faso has opened its doors to more than 700 Afro-descendants and members of the African diaspora from October 25th to November 8, 2025. In 2026, our diplomacy will focus on reorganizing the diplomatic framework across the world to take into account geopolitical changes, the effective and visionary exercise of the presidency of the Confederation, AES, the strengthening of the protection of our compatriots abroad, as well as the mobilization of their skills. Honorable members of Parliament, we can note that the year 2025 was marked by historical progress on all fronts of the popular progressive revolution. Under the leadership of the Comrade President of FASO, Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traore, we have consolidated our security, strengthened our social cohesion, invested in our human capital, affirmed our economic sovereignty, rebuilt our public services, and raised our voice high in the world. From the situation I have just presented, you have certainly seen a Burkina Faso that is rebuilding itself through a certain victory over terrorism, the return of state authority, the structural transformation of our economy, and popular and civic mobilization. The government has undertaken bold structural reforms on the political, economic, and social levels. But it is not because we have undertaken reforms, however courageous they may be, that we have refounded Burkina Faso. To refound is to create a new social and political contract between the governed and the governors. To refound is to change behavior by becoming much more respectful of republican symbols, values, and laws. Finally, to refound is to start on a new basis, drawing from our socio-cultural riches to find new paths toward a more responsible and patriotic citizen, toward a new national order, toward a new approach to development that breaks with the confiscation of our sovereign prerogatives by imperialist powers. This is what the government, under the leadership of the Comrade President of FASO, is striving to build. My conviction is that everything is possible as long as Burkinabe dream big, dare, and never surrender in the face of adversity. We must, however, remain mobilized and vigilant to block the way to any form of restoration of a neo-colonial order that is gone forever. Imperialism is a poor student, as the father of the August 1983 revolution pointed out. It is not willing to give up its quest to seize control of our country to satisfy its voracious and predatory instincts. It is up to us to remind it that on the land of Daniel Uwezin Coulibaly, Philippe Zinda Kabore, Nadzi Boni, and Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, there are women and men standing tall, free, dignified, and with integrity to lead the fight for freedom and sovereignty for our people. The path we are charting is demanding, but it is the path of regained sovereignty, social justice, and endogenous development. It is the path of a Burkina Faso standing tall and master of its own destiny. I invite all Burkinabe from within and abroad to be worthy of our predecessors' legacy and to continue the fight to remain mobilized and committed. Let us continue together with confidence, courage, and determination the legitimate struggle to reclaim our territory and build our nation. Long live the progressive and popular revolution. Long live Burkina Faso, free and prosperous. Strength and victory to the defense and security forces, to the VDP, and to the people. Homeland or death, we shall overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, for this important presentation. Dear fellow deputies, the speaking times allotted to each constituted group are as follows. The Civil Society Organizations Group, 15 minutes. The Political Parties Group, 20 minutes. The Regional Stakeholders Group, 20 minutes. The Defense and Security Forces Group, 30 minutes. And the group of parliamentarians appointed by the head of state, 35 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, dear colleagues, for the remainder of our session, we will adopt the following procedure. The session is temporarily suspended for 30 minutes in order to allow the various established groups to prepare their questions. The session will resume to allow the established groups to ask their questions. Duration, 2 hours. Then a 2-hour suspension of the session to allow His Excellency the Prime Minister to gather the elements for his response. Finally, the session will resume to hear the responses from His Excellency the Prime Minister. Duration, 2 hours. The responses from His Excellency the Prime Minister to the deputies' questions will conclude today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, deputies, before suspending the session, on behalf of the national representation, I am pleased to express my gratitude to our distinguished guests. I would like to mention the heads of institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, and representatives of international organizations and inter-African organizations who have shown us their friendship and brotherhood by gracing with their presence this solemn plenary session dedicated to this Republican exercise. Honorable guests, thank you for coming. Thank you for being by our side. The session is therefore suspended for 30 minutes.
The Prime Minister addressed the major development projects in Burkina Faso in 5 points covering all sectors, socio-economic sectors of Burkina Faso. Before meeting with the deputies for questions, we will perhaps revisit some highlights of the Prime Minister's presentation, and we will perhaps address the issue of agriculture and on the agricultural front. Excuse me, the Prime Minister pointed out that agriculture constitutes the vital foundation of our economy and one of the major pillars of our struggle, the government's struggle for national sovereignty. This strategic orientation is driven by the Agropastoral and Fisheries Offensive, as well as the Presidential Initiative for Agricultural Production and Food Self-Sufficiency. And the results of the past agricultural campaign are very eloquent. And Burkina Faso recorded a national cereal production estimated at more than 7 million tons of cereals, bringing the coverage rate of Burkina Faso's cereal needs to more than 126%, a surplus level never before equaled in Burkina Faso. He also pointed out that rice production was increased and reached more than 1 million tons, representing an increase of more than 49% compared to the 2024-2025 campaign. He also highlighted that these tangible results are the fruit of the development and rehabilitation of more than 35,000 hectares of irrigated perimeters and lowlands, free plowing at subsidized prices for more than 51,000 hectares, reinforced supervision of the populations, the subsidy of nearly 70,000 tons of fertilizer, as well as the distribution of more than 12,000 tons of improved seeds. The Prime Minister also highlighted that in 2025, efforts continue to strengthen livestock and fisheries production. In this regard, he pointed out that more than 8,000 tons of concentrated feed were produced and made available to stakeholders in the sector, 7 million head of cattle and small ruminants, as well as more than 18 million head of poultry that were vaccinated. More than 5,600 hectares of pastoral zones were registered and 200 hectares of fodder crops were developed. It must be said that in this 2025 report as well, the Prime Minister highlighted the installation of 1,185 floating cages, the production of more than 104 million fingerlings, and the installation of 500 private fish production promoters who have achieved a production of more than 53,000 tons of fish, including more than 17,000 in floating cages. The Prime Minister concluded his remarks regarding food sovereignty and the ongoing agricultural offensive in Burkina. By saying this, our goal is to sustainably feed the Burkinabe through their own efforts and make agriculture a driver of growth, jobs, and sovereignty.
Christine Koulibaly, an important question was raised by the Prime Minister here at the Transitional Legislative Assembly. What kind of Burkinabe do we want for our dear homeland tomorrow? The question was addressed by the head of state, Captain Ibrahim Traore, during his New Year's speech. And to expand on this question, the Prime Minister said, faced with the concerning crisis of values, the government is working to build responsible Burkinabe citizens, respectful of their duties and obligations, and fully committed to meeting development challenges. Concerns leading to the establishment of mandatory patriotic immersion and the Faso Mebo holiday camps. The head of state made it very clear. The Prime Minister emphasized, I quote, "The revolution needs new citizens, patriotic, honest, and united, and we cannot lead the fight against imperialism without an awakened and conscious youth." End of quote. Hence the patriotic immersion that took place in 29 locations and brought together over 59,000 new high school graduates, to whom the basics for facing life were taught in connection with entrepreneurship, civic values, patriotism and civic engagement, geopolitical issues, ideology and development, social cohesion, and inter-community relations. The Faso Mebo holiday camps, it should be recalled, were an extension of the School of Life. They are part of the national rebuilding dynamic that places youth at the heart of building a more united and resilient Burkina Faso. The first edition of the Faso Mebo holiday camp brought together 910 children in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, and the results were beyond expectations.
So, Amadou Marcel Tuifu also added that government action in 2025 was also marked by the industrial offensive, according to the Prime Minister. Significant with the inauguration of 11 new industrial units, among which we have SN Brafaso, the Burkina Cashew Company, and many other businesses that strengthen the socio-economic fabric of Burkina Faso. He specified that these structural investments have allowed, in figures, to inject over 66 billion CFA francs as investment, which allowed for the creation of 660 permanent jobs. The Prime Minister emphasized that our craftsmanship is also a true pillar of our culture, seeing the completion of the construction of the equipment for the National Support Center for Artisanal Cotton Processing, Senatak, and the successful organization of the 5th Regional Fair for Craftsmanship, Sara, in Tenkodogo. In the trade sector, several actions have also been carried out, and the government's priority has been consumer protection and support for strategic sectors. To this end, the Prime Minister added that over 570 manufacturing units for food and non-food products were inspected, and over 28,000 actors were inspected as part of the fight against fraud. The dynamism of the Burkinabe private sector was reflected, according to the Prime Minister, by the creation of over 25,000 new companies and the issuance of 69 investment code approvals, showing renewed investor confidence in our economy. Thus, to stimulate investment, according to the Prime Minister, there was job creation, the law requiring large companies to build their headquarters in Burkina Faso, and this was adopted and currently concerns over 800 large companies. This means that jobs are on the horizon, and the Prime Minister added that the momentum will continue into 2026.
Now, an important point raised by the Prime Minister before the deputies is the opening up of regions. It remains a strategic lever for socio-economic development and territorial integration, maintains Prime Minister Rim Talba Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo. In 2025, the government completed nearly 102 kilometers of paved national roads, over 66 kilometers of paved urban roads, 92 kilometers of rehabilitated roads, as well as 697 kilometers of rural tracks and several crossing structures. And 3 modern toll stations were put into service in Tintilou, Bontenga, and Kotedougou near Bobo Dioulasso. Construction work on the Ouaga-Bobo Dioulasso highway will continue, and the paving of several other road axes will soon be launched, maintains the head of government. And then in terms of urban mobility, besides opening new bus lines following the acquisition of 530, the 530 buses, pre-feasibility studies for a metro in the 2 main urban centers, Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, will be started by then. Air transport has been consolidated and strengthened by the acquisition of a new aircraft for the airline Air Burkina and by the creation of the Faso Airports Company, whose mission is to drive a structural reorganization of air transport in Burkina Faso.
While things are being set up here for the resumption of the proceedings, members of the government are here, as are the deputies. We are waiting for the Prime Minister and the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly for the rest of the session, which I recall is dedicated to questions from deputies. It must be said that in the Prime Minister's presentation, one of the sectors that shone in 2025 was indeed the tourism sector. And in this regard, the Prime Minister said that there have been several policies. And faced with stereotypes, the government took the initiative to produce and distribute a memorandum to deconstruct cliches and misconceptions and to present the true dynamic in Burkina Faso, that of a resilient people committed to the path of security and development. And he added that Burkina Faso has remained attractive throughout the year 2025, and as proof he pointed to the activities in tourist accommodation establishments, which saw a 1.3% increase compared to 2024, with a significant share of domestic tourists, namely 78%. As for visits to tourist sites, they recorded a 177% increase in 2025. This means that the sector has remained very dynamic, attracting a lot of people. And in this regard, the Prime Minister added that the sector's attractiveness has been strengthened with the inauguration of the Thomas Sankara Mausoleum and the institution of the memorial tribute, the military tribute ceremony, called Sankara Lives Forever, which every Thursday, the first Thursday of the month, draws tourists to this site. 2025 also saw major actions like the successful organization of cultural events such as FESPACO, which crowned the Burkinabe filmmaker Dani Kouyaté with the Golden Stallion of Yenenga. In the dynamic of strengthening cultural sovereignty, Burkina Faso has therefore carried out enormous reforms in the sector by creating structures to better support the Burkinabe film industry. He also gave a nod to the sports sector, which has also shown nationally and internationally, a sector seen by the government as a lever for growth. The investments made in this sector allowed for the completion and certification of the August 4th Stadium, the ongoing construction of the Iguema Stadium in Bobo Dioulasso, as well as the organization of the 37th edition of the Tour du Faso cycling race, with Burkina Faso once again taking the title. So this dynamic, as the Prime Minister confirmed or stated, will continue with the construction of 5 sports academies.
Now, the Prime Minister also raised an important issue, which is the question of housing. Also, in terms of urban planning and housing, notable progress has been recorded with the production of over 18,000 plots. in Fadanigurma, Bobo Dioulasso, Ouagadougou, Orodara, Garango, Sabah, Komsilga, and the construction of more than 1,300 housing units in several cities in Burkina. It is also planned for 2026 the completion of more than 1,000 housing units for the benefit of the Burkinabe. There is also the launch of major real estate projects in 2025, such as the Zafara Plaza complex, which sets the tone for a true ambition to modernize our cities, which will continue exactly. Efforts will also continue to improve the population's access to decent housing. For the year 2026, as I said, the government will ensure the construction of at least 1,000 social and economic housing units as part of the 50,000 housing program. Christine Koulibaly.
It must be said that the government also initiated in 2025 measures to rationalize public spending and reduce the state's lifestyle to better align them with national priorities and improve the well-being of the Burkinabe. The Prime Minister added that these measures save 478 million CFA francs on water, electricity, and telecommunications expenses, 621 million CFA francs on administrative leases, and an institutional rationalization through the abolition or reform of structures with low added value. As an illustration, then, the Prime Minister pointed out that we can also mention the abolition of the Independent National Electoral Commission, CENI, and the merging of 14 national funds into 4 funds. These efforts, which continued in 2026, reflect a requirement for consistency and exemplarity. The state, he says, is reforming itself in order to better serve the people and to free up budgetary margins for the benefit of social sectors and structural investments.
And to achieve this, the government is resolutely committed to the fight against financial delinquency. In this sense, more than 3,000 companies were subject to tax audits, allowing for the effective recovery of more than 47 billion CFA francs. In 2025, more than 28,000 economic actors, as well as 473 industrial companies, were audited as part of the fight against commercial fraud and anti-competitive practices. Substantial seizures were carried out. We note more than 2,165 tons of shea nuts. 1,850 deposit accounts of ministries and institutions were audited in order to fight against financial embezzlement in Burkina. Furthermore, the defense of the state's interests by the state's judicial agent has made it possible to avoid security, has thus allowed for an effective fight, avoiding financial penalties of 21 billion CFA francs and recovering 16 billion CFA francs. Efforts to combat money laundering and terrorism financing intensified in 2025 and allowed for the removal of Burkina Faso from the Financial Action Task Force list on October 24, 2025, thus improving financial stability and Burkina Faso's international standing. Furthermore, a new law on freedom of association was adopted with a view to cleaning up the associative sector and improving the fight against money laundering and terrorism financing.
Now, no sovereignty or sustainable development can prosper without effective control over land. The Prime Minister's conviction. In the logic then of improving the management of this sector and asserting the state's leadership over the national land domain. The law on agrarian and land reorganization was adopted and establishes the state's full and complete ownership over the national land domain. Amadou Marcel Toy, it must be said that things will soon begin, or rather resume here. We are witnessing the arrival of the Prime Minister. In a few moments, the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly will also join the Assembly for the continuation of the work, which, I remind you, is dedicated to questions from the deputies. And the deputies have 2 hours to ask their questions. Next, it should be noted that there will be a suspension to allow the head of government to prepare answers to the questions raised. Here to the concerns raised by the various deputies. Then there will be another suspension, and we will return here then for the answers to the various questions. So I was saying that for the Prime Minister, major interest is given to the land sector, and the continuation of actions to secure the land and cadastral domain has made it possible to digitize, according to the Prime Minister, more than 186,000 cadastral references and to evaluate more than 1,500 plots in iCadastre. to georeference the plans of 13 localities and to register 245 plots of land belonging to the state.
Christine Koulibaly, it must be said that we find the Prime Minister, Rimtalba Jean-Emmanuel Oufdrago, as usual, relaxed. And what awaits him? The multiple questions that the deputies will ask, we see he is preparing himself while awaiting the imminent arrival of the President of the ELT, Dr. Ousmane Bougouma.
Indeed, in a few moments, we are now going to witness the resumption of the proceedings. And in the meantime, as we wait, we can perhaps, at this point in time, continue with the summary of the report on the state of the nation. A 5-point summary, as I was saying, which covered all the socio-economic and cultural sectors of Burkina Faso. And the Prime Minister, at least according to the report given, the indicators are green. Many things are being done to improve not only the living conditions of Burkinabes, to give a new lease of life to the Burkinabe economy with significant progress, particularly in the fight for food sovereignty in Burkina Faso. He emphasized Burkina Faso, and it's been known for some time, Burkina Faso has achieved a record production of over 7 million tons of grain, which corresponds to over 120% of its grain needs. He said that this is due to a whole package, I would say, of actions, of programs, implementation of programs based on subsidies, production support, free plowing, and the involvement of all components of society, namely producers, inmates, internally displaced persons, and processors to create a value chain. He hammered home once again today, the government's ambition is to make agriculture not only a sector that meets needs and can ensure Burkina's food sovereignty, a real sovereignty according to the Prime Minister, but also to make this sector a sector for wealth creation and employment. We see this through various initiatives, notably the training of agricultural VDPs who are trained and settled in their home locality to allow them to start agricultural production. We have reports in our various editions at every turn showing what these agricultural VDPs are doing on the ground. He also mentioned the Agropastoral and fisheries offensive through fish production, which has allowed Burkina Faso to make a leap in terms of covering its fish needs. We note a production of over 53,000 tons of fish, 17,000 of which were produced by floating cages. And when we know that the government in this sector subsidizes and supports private promoters in this sector with the same ambition to promote or ensure Burkina Faso's self-sufficiency in all these sectors, whether it be the food sector, the fish production sector, and many other sectors. Amadou Maiga.
Christine Koulibaly, if time permits, we will return to what was said regarding Burkina Faso's partners. The Prime Minister stated that the diversification of partnerships initiated by the government has broken the cycles of dependency, opening new horizons, and strengthening Burkina Faso's capacity to finance its own development. He maintains, in fact, that we have established diplomatic relations with Kyrgyzstan.
Marcel, time will not permit us. We are witnessing the arrival of the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly for the resumption of work here at the Transitional Legislative Assembly.
So a resumption marked by the session of questions from the deputies.
The session is resumed. Ladies and gentlemen, deputies, dear colleagues, as previously announced, I will give the floor successively to the various constituent groups so they may ask their questions. I will begin with the civil society organizations constituent group. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Excellency, Mr. President. Let me just say, before we go ahead and raise our concerns, our constituent group would like to congratulate His Excellency the Prime Minister and his government for all the sustained and constant efforts to lead Burkina Faso toward better days. And we hope that God gives you the health and strength necessary to continue the fight. Excellency, Mr. President, do not worry. About the 15 minutes, we have 8 speakers with 12 questions. I will call in order all those who are going to speak. Our 15 minutes start now, Mr. President. Yan Gedeon Alain first, Zungrana Nementa, Wedraogo Sabine, Wedraogo Suleimane, Sawadogo Issa, Kone Musa, Bayulu Benedict, and Gansore Mark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Excellency, and thanks to Mark representing Diala, our president. 2 quick questions. The first question, Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, when will the global review take place? Better yet, the drafting of a new constitution for Burkina Faso from the perspective of national sovereignty and our endogenous socio-cultural and historical values, with full participation of the people from the village level through the commune, department, province, and region. Excellency, was I too fast? It's fine. The second question is an exhortation combined with a short question. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, regarding the passing of laws, the Legislative Assembly always urges sectoral bodies to ensure broad involvement and participation of stakeholders when drafting the implementing regulations for the laws passed. Unfortunately, during hearings with various stakeholders, we hear that there is little involvement of parastatal and private actors who are the targets of the implementing regulations adopted at the sectoral level. What does your government plan to do to address this heartfelt plea from the stakeholders? Thank you, Excellency, for the floor.
Excellency, regarding your question, what kind of Burkinabe for tomorrow for our dear homeland?
Please, you must introduce yourself when taking the floor.
Excellency, I am Dr. Yen Diedon Alain. I am from the constituted group but representing the private sector. I come from a village where the CSPS has no fence, the CSPS has no fence, the middle school has no fence. I'll stop there perhaps. But I love my village, unlike others who think that, my relatives jokingly, they think their village is Ouagadougou.
Thank you. Nemata Brigitte Zongrana from the OSC constituted group. Excellency. To your question, what kind of Burkinabe for tomorrow, for our dear homeland, I answer this. The Burkinabe of tomorrow that we aspire to see emerge for our homeland is a citizen of integrity, educated, sound in body and mind, committed to the values of work, respect, solidarity, and justice. But how can we have this Burkinabe if drugs are found on our mothers' tables at the small school markets, within reach of our children, hidden in candies and juices costing 25 or 50 francs? What strategy do you plan to implement to protect our children from the grip of drugs so as to ensure the emergence of a Burkinabe of tomorrow, who knows, who is truly up to the level of our aspirations? The second question. I already welcome the presidential initiative focused on water and energy, which aims to make the daily life of the Burkinabe citizen easier. Can we know what this will consist of? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, for the floor. My name is Ouedraogo Soleimane. I belong to the group of civil society organizations representing people with disabilities at the TLA. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, when we look at future projections, it is clear that terrorism will increase the number of people with disabilities in Burkina Faso. Paradoxically, there is very little data and research on disability. To ensure that humanitarian response actions fully take into account the needs of people with disabilities and do not leave them on the sidelines, could you please tell us today what the current number of internally displaced individuals with disabilities is and how many of them have been resettled and supported? Second question, if there is one law that was talked about a lot in 2023, it is the one concerning the strengthening of political neutrality and meritocracy in the public administration. Many skeptics saw in this law of legal pollution because they felt that it is not the relevant provisions for the fight against politicization in the public administration that are lacking, but rather something else. It's the application that is lacking. Can the government today give me an assessment or at least the status of implementation of this law to definitively dispel the apprehensions of the most skeptical? Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, Mr. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I am Issa Sewadogo, a deputy and proud member of the CSO's civil society organizations. It is an honor to address you all today. I have, just to be clear, only one important concern that I would like to share with you. Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, what does the government at the present moment currently plan to improve the situation? I'll start over, please. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, what priority actions does the government plan to improve accessibility to jobs, healthcare, infrastructure, and social protection systems for people with disabilities, in order to reduce the obstacles that still limit their autonomy in Burkina Faso? Thank you.
Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, could you please explain to us what are the main reasons for the ongoing delay in Sofitex payments to the cotton producers? We would appreciate your insights on this matter. Musa Kone, Deputy Member of the CSO Constituent Group. Second question, what is the status of the implementation of the provision of agricultural inputs for rural actors for the 2025-2026 season? Third question, what is the status of the implementation of the project related to the geolocation of cattle? Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, allow me to remind you that you promised us in 2024 that the Banfora-Gawa Road would be paved in 2026. So we hope that this project will come to fruition this year. Thank you.
I am Benedict Bailu, member of the CSO Constituent Group. Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, in several health facilities, notably the university hospitals and some regional hospitals, the need for incubators remains largely unmet, to the point that a single incubator can serve several premature babies, or that we resort to improvised alternatives with increased risks of hypothermia, infection, and death. Subject to more recent statistics, those from 2021 and 2023 show 25 deaths per 1,000 live births, according to the World Bank. Excellency, what is the actual state to date of the neonatal incubator fleet by health facility level, UHC, RHC, MCA, and the gaps compared to the standards the government has set? As part of the continued efforts to strengthen hospital technical facilities, what concrete budgetary and operational measures does your government intend to take to bridge the gap in incubators and essential neonatology equipment? Thank you.
Gansore Mark Bertin, I first bring a first question from my colleague Wedraogo Sabin, which is as follows. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the Sahel and North regions are experiencing a sharp reduction in population mobility following the destruction of several strategic crossing infrastructures. What measures has the government taken or does it plan to take to allow transporters or road drivers to safely ensure the supply of areas with high security deficits and to facilitate the mobility of people and regions? Now, these are my two questions, Mr. Excellency. My first question is related to agriculture and food self-sufficiency. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, in areas where the terrain does not allow for the construction of conventional dams, does the government plan to intensify subsidized hydro-agricultural alternatives to help ensure irrigation and support farm productivity? The second question to conclude, the massive road project, the highway, which we are proud to be able to benefit from very soon, has slowed down a number of construction sites. Can we truly hope that National Road number 13 can indeed, at long last, finally see the light of day in the year 2026? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. President, we have finished, and I believe we are within the allotted time.
Thank you. The political party group, you have 20 minutes. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellencies, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. Ousmane Diallo, President of the political party group. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the political party group, through me, congratulates the government on this report on the state of the nation. Through this exercise, the government embraces a Republican spirit and thus fulfills a welcome duty of accountability that honors it. In a demanding national context, our group commends the actions taken in key sectors, such as security, agriculture, justice, health, education, infrastructure, mobility, as well as other areas essential to stability, resilience, and the development of our country. Our group is particularly pleased to note that despite the struggle to reclaim national territory and global geopolitical tensions, your government, under the leadership of His Excellency, Comrade President Ibrahim Traoré, has succeeded in launching a dynamic of endogenous development that positions our country among respected nations. Indeed, the results achieved by your government, notably in reclaiming territory and food self-sufficiency, as well as the tangible results achieved through the successful implementation of presidential initiatives, are sufficiently indicative of the performance of government action. All these efforts translate into growth supported by an increase in the budget's own revenues and sound, rigorous management of public finances. We note with great interest that government action is part of a virtuous dynamic characterized by pragmatism, boldness, and responsibility. Our group also welcomes the considerable progress made in formalizing the Confederation of Sahel States and signals its full support for the consolidation of this sovereignist and revolutionary momentum that commands the world's admiration. Our established group supports the enormous efforts made by the government to promote social cohesion and living together. Now, Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, I will give the floor to the Honorable Ali Badra Ouedraogo to bring our concerns to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President of the group made up of political parties. My name is Ali Badra Ouedraogo, a member of parliament for the group made up of political parties. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, we have proceeded with a methodical, scientific, and revolutionary organization of our work. This means that we will save time, which we will offer to you as a New Year's gift. We have a total of 8 questions. So you see that we have not been wordy given the precision, clarity, conciseness, and sincerity of your presentation. First question. We welcome the government's efforts to ensure quality care for the benefit of the population. Despite these efforts, difficulties persist, particularly the availability of quality medicines.
the disparity in the prices of pharmaceutical products, and the issue of traditional pharmacopoeia and online aesthetic care. How does the government intend to go about it? To ensure the availability of medicines, ensure price regulation, and fight against the unregulated sale of products online. Second question. The Prime Minister reassured in his presentation that efforts will continue to improve the population's access to decent housing. Thus, the construction of at least 1,000 social and economic housing units is planned. However, Mr. Prime Minister, access to housing also depends on controlling the cost of construction materials. Question: how does the government intend to support households in the construction of residential housing, given the inflation observed in the prices of these materials? Third question. Technical and vocational education in Burkina Faso is undergoing reform to align training with market needs in order to reduce unemployment. Among young people, major initiatives are being taken. Measures aiming to transform general education establishments into multipurpose ones are being implemented. Can the government provide the national representation with an update on the status of this ambitious reform? Question number 4. To ensure true food sovereignty, the government has opted for the field-side purchase of cereals in order to build up a stock of food security. What is the current status of this operation? Question number 5. To control the risks of inflation on the prices of consumer goods and to ensure their availability, the government, in addition to boosting the operational capacities of price control structures, has banned the export of cereals and set up the FASO yars. Question: what guarantees can the government give us to ensure the availability of these products and to curb inflation on their prices, especially during the fasting periods? Question number 6. Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, we welcome the efforts made by your government for the reconquest of the territory, as well as the actions of consolidation that are being undertaken. However, it must be noted that many abandoned construction sites in the reconquered localities are still at a standstill, particularly basic public social facilities. Question: what does the government plan to do for the completion of these projects? Question number 7. In a context marked by the scarcity of agropastoral resources, what operational policy does the government plan to secure transhumance corridors, improve access to animal feed and water points for animals? The last question, finally, question number 8 then. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, for several months now, we have been witnessing a shortage of butane gas. This situation results in long queues and difficulties in supply for households. However, the Burkina National Hydrocarbons Company, Sonabi, claims to be able to increase to more than 600 tons of gas per day to fill the gap in this area. What could explain this situation? Second question, sub-question: what immediate solutions does the government envision to relieve the populations? Thank you, Excellency, Mr. President of the Assembly, Mr. President of the Constituted Group. I have reached the end then of all the questions that were addressed to the Prime Minister by the group made up of political parties. Thank you.
Thank you. The group representing the vital forces of the regions. You have 20 minutes. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. My name is Traoré Bourema. On behalf of the Vital Forces of the Regions Group, and before presenting our questions on behalf of our group, I congratulate His Excellency the Prime Minister, as well as the members of his government, and we wish them a productive working session. So moving forward, I will designate the Honorable Ini, Mrs. Damien Ini Nkuraba, to present our concerns. Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellencies, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, as the President of the group representing the vital forces of the regions, said, I am Damien, Yul, Ini, and Kuraba. The vital forces of the regions group, we have 6 questions. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the establishment of a multidisciplinary reference laboratory aims to strengthen the national technical platform and to significantly improve the effectiveness of patient care and disease treatment. Can you indicate to the national representation the implementation status of this project, as well as the concrete benefits expected in terms of health security, quality control, and the scientific sovereignty of Burkina Faso? Furthermore, what disciplines and priority areas does this laboratory cover? And how does this system integrate into the national quality control and analysis system? Question number 2. Faced with the growing expectations of our fellow citizens regarding good governance, what concrete measures does your government intend to take to reduce state spending, effectively strengthen the fight against corruption, and ensure a more equitable redistribution of the fruits of growth so that the benefits of development truly profit the entire population, particularly the most vulnerable groups? Question number 3. Our country has recorded a good agricultural season. However, we continue to import significant food products, often unfit for consumption. What justifies this state of affairs, and what measures can the government take to control and avoid these imports, not only to promote our local production, but also to preserve the health of the population? What could be the impact on the prices of agricultural products? Question number 4. Our country has adopted the law establishing the Committees for Monitoring and Development, COVID. These committees constitute a framework for citizen participation, allowing the population to debate their concerns of general interest. However, to date, the effective implementation of this law is slow to materialize throughout the national territory. In several localities, the old village structures, notably the village development committees, continue to have influence in the management of villages in certain localities. What are the reasons for this delay in implementation of this legislative provision, and by what deadline does the government plan its effective application across the entire territory? Question number 5. The government has undertaken beneficial actions within the framework of improving health and road infrastructure. However, it is noted that in some regions, the lack or insufficiency of these infrastructures hinders development efforts. For example, the RN3 and the RN18. There is also the road, as the Honorable Gawa Banfora said. What does the government plan in this regard? Question number 6. The government announced, following the creation of the new administrative districts, the operationalization in January 2026. To date, the observation is quite different. Excellency, when will this operationalization take place to achieve the objectives targeted by this strong decision made by your government? Finally, that was the last question, but it is, let me think for a moment. Regarding the commitments made by the government during the Prime Minister's General Policy Declaration on December 27, 2024, at point 10, it is said to work towards a true reconciliation of Burkinabés, that of the hearts of communities, with each other, through consultations and approaches to promote endogenous consensual values. So our group, we find that this point is very important for peace and social cohesion. Therefore, we urge the government to make every effort to ensure that this commitment becomes a visible, observable, and palpable reality. And I will conclude by making a recommendation for the sake of equality and equity. Indeed, when we look at it,
In Burkina Faso, women represent more than 52% of the population. And so, for the sake of equality and equity, this is a proposal, and we can reflect on this, Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister. We propose that we take into account or set up a committee of women advisors from rural areas. In the villages of the 16 regions of Burkina Faso, the women of the rural areas.
The 17 regions.
The 17, right? 17. I had counted. Thank you, Excellencies. In all the villages, in any case, it would be a good thing. And thus, all at once, we will witness the participation of women in decision-making bodies. So thank you, Excellencies. Mr. President, here is a point from below.
I thank you. I give the floor to the group consisting of the Defense and Security Forces. You have 30 minutes. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellencies, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. I am Dentist Colonel Major Guy Gamdouen Pouya Patrice Laurent, President of the Defense and Security Forces Group. Excellencies, sir, the Prime Minister, Head of Government, our group, the Defense and Security Forces, wishes to renew its unwavering support for the President of Faso, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, His Excellence Captain Ibrahim Traoré, as well as the entire government. We salute your steadfast and resolute commitment, your deep commitment to the reconquest of our national sovereignty, a historic challenge that we will meet together. Your presentation on the state of the nation, intended to be sincere, was revealed to us without pretense. No frills, in accordance with your revolutionary spirit, convinced and convincing, saying what he does and doing what he says, reassuring. Thus a Burkinabe population. Which was, not so long ago, I was feeling deeply distraught, completely lost, and wandering on the very edge of despair, or even considering self-harm just to escape the heavy burden of shame. Today we see the real and tangible fruits of our ongoing internal efforts, clear and certain precursors of a much brighter future, one of sovereignty and true human dignity, recovered even in a cruel world full of predators, without faith or law. We therefore congratulate you and encourage you to relentlessly pursue the ideals of the popular progressive revolution, a guarantee of improving the quality of life for the Burkinabe people. Successively, 3 honorable deputies from the established group, who will each introduce themselves in turn, will bring our questions to your attention. I thank you, and I pass the floor to the first deputy of the group.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Excellencies. I'm going to start with the first question.
Introduce yourself, please.
Sangare Musa, Deputy Sangare Musa. Excellency, sir, Prime Minister, in a context marked by security and humanitarian challenges and high population expectations, how can we strengthen coordination between civil, military, and community actors while ensuring social cohesion and trust between the state and citizens are preserved? Excellency, sir, Prime Minister, the importance of science high schools in Burkina Faso is well established. That is why we want to know what concrete initiatives are being taken to provide our 2 national science high schools with effective financial autonomy. And what tracking mechanisms are in place for students from these schools after their baccalaureate. Third question, what measures is the government taking to better protect the elderly in order to guarantee them dignified living conditions and better access to health care? Fourth question. What is the status of implementation of Law number 002-2023-ALT of March 16, 2023, regarding the strengthening of political neutrality and meritocracy in the public administration of Burkina Faso? Has the government encountered difficulties in the implementation of this law? Fifth question, what specific measures have been taken so far to effectively prevent the export from the national territory of the grain surplus that was recorded during the last season in order to maintain prices for the benefit of the population? Sixth question, the consumption of psychotropic drugs has increasingly become an aggravating factor in the urban crime and an indoctrination tool frequently used by terrorist groups. What offensive action is the government taking to overcome this scourge, which is also gaining ground in schools? 7, what structural measures do you plan to take to ensure preventive, permanent, and effective surveillance of our markets, to avoid the sale of products unfit for consumption, as well as the storage and sale of explosive products? 8, access for VDPs to subsidized cereals under Sonages was a priority announced in March 2023. Today, Excellencies, do our distribution mechanisms effectively cover areas with high security challenges? Are there still areas where our volunteers struggle to get supplies? Ninth question, what powerful and decisive action should be taken to strengthen and to accelerate the fight against the effects of climate change and ensure the effective and sustainable management of ecosystems? I now pass the floor to my colleague.
Thank you, Excellency. I am the Honorable Luglaweneng Clemas Wetraogo, proudly serving as a representative member of the Defense and Security Forces Group. Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, I will now proceed to read out the remaining questions that have been submitted by the group for our consideration. Question number 10. To succeed in effectively clearing the forests and driving terrorist groups out of the forest massifs, on one hand, and on the other hand, to significantly reduce or even completely stop their illegal mining activities in these forests, as previously discussed, which in these forests can serve as sources of funding for terrorist groups. It is undeniable that we must strengthen the operational capacities of the forest services. Thus, can the national representation be reassured of the general measures taken to this effect? Question number 11. What measures do you intend to take against the networks of middlemen who continue to speculate on rural lands? This is question number 12. Does the government plan to establish a systematic psychological support system for the benefit of all the fighting forces? Upon their return from the field of operations, what measures are in place to ensure their smooth reintegration into society and continued well-being? What about the retraining and rehabilitation of those wounded in action, making sure they can adapt to new roles and opportunities? Question number 13. How does the government plan to further support and strengthen the revenue agencies to achieve greater efficiency in mobilizing the state's own resources? Thus, distinguished delegates, thank you for your attention and for the thoughtful discussions we have shared so far. At this time, I would like to respectfully pass the floor to the Honorable Widraogo Mahamadi, who will continue with the remaining matters before us.
If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I am always happy to help and will do my best to provide clear answers. Your questions are welcome, so do not hesitate to reach out if there is anything you would like to know. I greet the Assembly and thank you. I also greet the Prime Minister and his team. I am the Honorable Widraogo Mahamadi, a member of the Defense and Security Forces Group. We have some concerns to share with the Prime Minister regarding the mobilization of resources. Prime Minister, we are here to discuss the recruitment of the VDPs. We want to understand the process clearly. It is essential for us to know how this recruitment is being conducted in our various localities. We have observed some issues that need to be addressed regarding the selection and training of these volunteers. We need to ensure that the process is fair and that everyone who wants to serve has the opportunity to do so. Regarding the recruitment at the communal level, we have noticed some discrepancies. We must ensure that the communication between the national and local levels is transparent. I would like to speak specifically about the provinces and regions where the VDPs are being deployed and their integration into the security structure. We need to make sure that the resources are distributed equitably across all regions. It is not just about the numbers, but also about the overall quality of the recruits. We need to ensure that local leaders are actively involved in the process to help guarantee that the right individuals are carefully chosen. This is absolutely vital for the success of our defense strategy and for the ongoing safety of our communities. We must also thoughtfully consider the long-term support for these dedicated volunteers and their families. We also need to carefully examine the important role of the secretaries and how they are responsible for managing the VDP lists. There should be a clear and well-defined distinction between national and local VDPs. This distinction will help facilitate better coordination and more effective resource allocation for their training and equipment. Additionally, we need to have a centralized database in place to accurately track all the volunteers and their current status. We must collaborate with the soldiers to provide the best training for our volunteers. Yes, so it will be a comprehensive coverage. I have noted some concerns from those who were not selected in the initial phase, moving forward with the plan. They are not just waiting, they are ready to serve their country. As a young man, I have seen the impact of this initiative since 1982, and I believe in its potential. If we continue this dialogue, we can resolve the issues by next Wednesday. This isn't about the past. It's about our future security and standing together as a nation. Our progress is incredible, but looking closer, it starts from within. But not even once have the signs been companions. They are called sages. They gave him a command. Let yourselves be. It's not perhaps a molting. And I made the journeys regarding the fair, so let's climb rationally, particularly, I don't know, it's a tape, Eva, not the military Orumi. It's quite easy to, it brings me. Granddaughter, this message says we wouldn't be, so it's not true. Harmless never. What are we doing with our scene quarter Chicho? Oh my, it's very paranoid to go back to the cabbage because I don't have any faults. Say the month is my model, but in all of these cases, we simply cannot connect. There's really nothing else but the passage, it seems, Prime Minister, but it's going very, very slowly with 165,000 congressmen going to self-progress, if there is anything other than this, a rehabilitation, not a vice. They sold 2010 and we, together with less. Paris Group, if we actually get into it and really start to look at the details, campaign scholarships for money, which is a significant focus for us. The breath life cycle, as we know, is ongoing. We are in phase, and presenters are not executing as expected. We were able to listen to my Stood Because Christine Bang, success quarter. He had too much that we were aiming for him. And unfortunately, Buddy is torn into pieces. This situation is complex, and as we continue to move forward, it is important to keep all these factors in mind, making sure we address each challenge as it arises.
Legislative Assembly of the Transition.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, Mr. Prime Minister, esteemed Head of Government, ladies and gentlemen, this is in essence the core of the questions from the constituted group. With your permission, the Honorable Giti Lassina could provide a quick summary in French of the remarks made by our respected colleague.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you also to the Prime Minister. I have been asked to very quickly summarize in French what our VDP colleague said. I will therefore attempt this exercise. He asked several questions. The first is related to the training of the VDPs. He believes that the training of the VDPs is insufficient and that this does not facilitate the management of these VDPs. This is to request a bit more training for the VDPs. The second question concerns the recruitment of communal VDPs. Therefore, he requests that more communal VDPs be recruited. The third question relates to the timely transmission of information to the VDPs, because he believes that there is sometimes a withholding of information that does not reach the VDPs in time, which causes problems. The fourth question is a grievance regarding the support that he's requesting for the communal VDPs, especially for those communal VDPs located in areas that are still only accessible by convoy. His fifth question specifically concerns the payments that the VDPs are entitled to receive. He believes there are certain months when some VDPs aren't paid what they're owed, and this happens without any explanation. So he wants this matter to be cleared up. The last concern he mentioned relates to the resettled villages and the massive numbers of students in the schools of those villages. He gives an example saying that sometimes more than 150 students are in a single classroom in a resettled village. He's asking the government to take measures to look into this as well and to help facilitate the education of these children in these resettled villages. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's what he said. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for that exceptional interpretation. We're going to take a short break for 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll resume shortly. Thank you.
So, dear viewers, you're joining us from the chamber where the Prime Minister's accountability exercise has been taking place since this morning, namely the report on the state of the nation. And since this morning, the Prime Minister has given his presentation, and we were at the stage of questions from the deputies. We are taking, according to the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, a 5-minute break to resume the proceedings in a few moments. In the meantime, several parliamentary groups or constituent groups have had the floor to raise questions and concerns. Among these concerns, we have the suggestion or the question of when a new constitution for Burkina Faso will be drafted that is more in line with the realities of Burkina. We also have questions related to the fight against drugs and narcotics, especially around educational institutions, to keep the youth away from these phenomena that have been a blight on the school environment and the youth in Burkina Faso. Questions were also raised about the coverage of health facilities with incubators to reduce mortality in neonatal care. There is also improved access to a wider range of jobs and better healthcare services for people living with disabilities. In addition, there were several questions raised regarding the ongoing payment delays that have been affecting cotton producers. What exactly is causing the blockage at Sofitex? The deputies were eager to know more about this issue. There are also additional questions about the current status and the progress of the implementation of certain important reforms remain shelved, specifically the policy for promoting the elderly and how to manage the cereal surplus from the current agricultural campaign. These are some of the questions raised by the deputies here. For more details, we turn to Amadou Marcel.
It should be noted that we are in a consensual assembly, one might say somewhat homogeneous. We see a deputy on behalf of the VDP who took the floor and spoke in more. This means everyone has the right to speak here at the Transitional Legislative Assembly. Specifically, points were raised and questions asked by the groups here, notably the vital forces of the regions. It addresses national... When we talk about reconciliation, what exactly does this process involve and what specific means or methods are currently being used for its implementation? A decision on this matter was made in the year 2024. Actually, to clarify, it was in 2025 during the State of the Nation address. Now, regarding the national reconciliation efforts promoted by the Prime Minister, what is the current status of these initiatives? Additionally, what particular strategies or approaches are being used for the effective implementation of national reconciliation throughout the country of this initiative? Also, this parliamentary group highlighted the creation and reorganization of new districts. When will the exact implementation be? It was planned for January 2026, and we are at the 30th, yet nothing has been done. This is the concern of this group, the vital forces of the regions. And to return to what our dear VDP friend, the deputy representing the VDP here at the Transitional Legislative Assembly, he revisited the training of the VDP. He called for intensified training so that the VDP can be more operational in the field. He also requested the recruitment of more VDP at the communal level and support for its VDP. And now, regarding the situation, what exactly is being done for schools in the resettled villages? We do see schools being built, but it is clear that not everything is fully ready or operational yet. So what specific actions is the government currently taking in this particular case to address these issues? Now, Christine Koulibaly, I will give you the floor to speak and share your thoughts before I take it back.
Yes, I think we will be resuming the session here in the chamber very shortly because at this moment we are witnessing the arrival of the President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. This is happening for the purpose of continuing with the scheduled questions or perhaps for the continuation of the important work that is taking place here in the chamber. The session, as you can see, is about to proceed and everyone present is preparing for the next phase. We are all waiting in anticipation for the President to take their seat and for the proceedings to officially recommence so that the legislative process can move forward as planned.
The session is now resumed. I would like to thank the members of the Defense and Security Forces Group for their service. At this time, I am pleased to give the floor to the parliamentary group appointed by the head of state. You have a total of 35 minutes.
Thank you, Excellencies, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. I am Dr. Sier Francois Dassis Koulibaly, MP and President of the Parliamentary Group appointed by the Head of State. We are the last group to speak. It's not easy to speak after so many people, but allow us, Mr. Minister, to speak just a little, if you would be so kind. So, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, after your comprehensive and detailed general policy statement, you are here today, once again, for your second appearance before the national representation, to provide us with a thorough and updated report on the current state of the nation. We have listened to you with great anticipation, paying close attention to your words, and we appreciate the clarity and depth with which you have addressed the issues facing our country. Clearly, your presentation today genuinely pleases us in more ways than one. It pleases us because the progressive revolution and the movement of popular progressivism are both doing very well. It pleases us because our national sovereignty is being increasingly established in several important areas. It also pleases us because the Burkinabe people feel increasingly proud and confident of their country, hope is being reborn, and a renewed sense of optimism is spreading. Integrity is steadily taking root more and more, and patriotism is growing stronger every day. All of this has been made possible thanks to the series of important actions taken by your government under your dedicated leadership and the high leadership of His Excellency Captain Ibrahim Traore. We also warmly welcome the promising prospects you have outlined through your recent initiatives. the commitments already announced in your presentation. You are truly a man of your word and of action. Last year, several important commitments were made. On balance, the result is satisfactory and even at times goes beyond expectations. The life of a nation is an endless march forward. When one milestone is reached, another soon appears on the horizon. In doing so, there are always challenges to overcome, and we have no doubt about your ability to keep the torch of the triumphant march burning towards the horizon of happiness. As you well know, the more you are trusted, the more you are congratulated, the more you are applauded, the more you are condemned to perseverance. So stay determined, stay solid. You have, without a doubt, our wholehearted encouragement and our sincere blessings as you proceed. Yes, Excellencies, the distinguished parliamentary group, which has been officially appointed by the esteemed head of state, wishes to formally salute and commend the remarkable clarity as well as the exceptional quality of your comprehensive presentation. However, with your kind permission, allow them to respectfully address and present just a few important questions to you, 19 in total. These questions, which are of considerable significance, concern the following matters. Several areas will be addressed and will be delivered respectively by 3 deputies from the group, namely the Honorable Tuina Kanibe, the Honorable Wenyele Ambroise Nintiama, and the Honorable Marie-Angèle Tiendrebeogo Kalanzaga. With that, I now give the floor to the Honorable Tuina Kanibe.
Thank you, President, for the floor. I go by the name of Tuina Kanibe, and I am serving as a deputy of the distinguished group of parliamentarians who have been officially appointed by the head of state. Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, I am here today to respectfully bring forward 5 important concerns and issues that have been raised by the group for the consideration of the government. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, before we proceed to go through the questionnaire, I would like to sincerely echo and join in the compliments and kind words expressed in the introductory remarks made by the President of the Parliamentary Group. I wish you the very best of luck in your endeavors. The first concern relates specifically to good governance and the ongoing and important fight against corruption. And question 1. This issue is closely related to the various and often complex difficulties that have been encountered and faced by the government in its ongoing quest and determined efforts to achieve good governance, as well as its strong and persistent desire to effectively fight against corruption in all its forms. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, can we now truly say with confidence and certainty that zero tolerance for all forms of corruption is in fact a reality in our society today? Or is it still an aspiration that we are striving to fully realize in Burkina Faso? What are the major and most significant difficulties and challenges that are commonly encountered and faced by the government in its ongoing, permanent, and continuous quest and pursuit for good governance, as well as in the ongoing fight and struggle against corruption? What is your detailed and thoughtful assessment of the overall contribution and impact of associations and organizations operating and working in this important field? The second, this topic concerns the important issue of food sovereignty, and the question at hand specifically relates to the management and geographical distribution of agricultural equipment and resources. In order to achieve the goal of food self-sufficiency for its population, the government of Burkina Faso launched the presidential initiative known as the Agropastoral and Fisheries Offensive 2023. 2025. To this end, the country has made significant and substantial efforts to massively acquire a wide range of agricultural equipment, including but not limited to tractors, power tillers, motor pumps, and various other essential farming tools and machinery. While it is certainly true that the results achieved so far are indeed very satisfactory and encouraging, a major concern still remains, however. It is a matter of knowing, understanding, and determining exactly what challenges and issues persist despite the progress that has been made. What specific steps and actions has the government taken to ensure proper management of the equipment acquired and ongoing regular maintenance of this material in order to sustain and increase the results achieved? What is the geographical distribution of this equipment across the country? The third concern is the question. This concerns the impact of agricultural outcomes, particularly those observed over the past 2 years, on the importation of essential food products into our country. Have the significant results achieved by the ministry responsible for agriculture, water, animal, and fishery resources already started to influence the import of these basic food products? The reduction of Burkina Faso's dependence, especially when it comes to importing essential basic food products, remains important. Regarding the development of human capital and youth employment, now moving to question 4, which concerns the fate of the Burkina Sat1 project. One of it, what is happening with the Burkina Sat1 project? Burkina Faso's very first satellite, which was launched with the intention of, among other important objectives, helping to improve local farming practices, providing assistance in mineral exploration, as well as the identification of valuable groundwater resources, supporting efforts to build climate resilience, and also working to improve public health. Question 5, which relates to this topic. Disruptions of the computer network in public services can cause significant issues. The process of dematerializing public services is currently underway in Burkina Faso through the ongoing digitalization of various administrative procedures. The results achieved so far are very appreciable, and this digitalization constitutes an important step forward. An effective and reliable means of fighting against fraud as well as corruption in various sectors. However, for several months now, a significant number of users of public services have been consistently and repeatedly denouncing not only delays but also the frequent and sometimes prolonged unavailability of the computer network, especially when it comes to making payments, processing legalizations, and handling other important administrative procedures, among others. These malfunctions are currently being observed in almost all regions throughout the country. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, may I ask, what are the main causes behind this situation? What specific and concrete measures does the government plan to take, both in the short and medium term, to definitively put an end to this situation, which is detrimental to the collection process of public revenue? Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Mr. President of the Assembly, esteemed colleagues, my mission here today is now complete, and with great respect, I now pass the floor to Deputy Waniele Ambroise Nkiema. Thank you all for your attention. Waniele Ambroise Nkiema. Deputy Waniele, the floor is yours.
Ambroise Nkiema, Deputy of the Republic. Thank you, President, for the floor. So I am Nkiema Waniele Ambroise, as a distinguished member of the group formed by the parliamentarians who were appointed by the head of state, Your Excellencies, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. With your kind permission, I will now present the second series of questions from our PDCE group. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, as popular wisdom says, dialogue fosters understanding and cooperation. Clarity. It is in this particular sense, Your Excellencies, that I would now like to respectfully address to you the following important questions which come from our PDC group in order to gain a much deeper and more comprehensive understanding of the true substance and nature of your commitments. So, in connection with the following points, social cohesion. Certainly, the question had already been addressed by the group made up of the region's active forces. So, nevertheless, we will come back to that. In October-November 2023, a constitutional revision established the abolition of the Mediator of Faso and the Economic and Social Council. In replacement, there was instituted the National Council of Communities, CNC, a mediation, consultation, and proposal body under Article 141 of the Constitution. 1 year later, can we have a status report on the implementation process of this constitutional provision?
Similarly, since March 2023, the law establishing the Watch and Development Committees, COVID, was passed. To date, no COVID is functional. Yet, by their mandate, the COVID are undoubtedly major supports for the national construction dynamic led by the government. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, can we then know what difficulties the government is encountering in the implementation of the law on the COVID? Question 7, regarding the Donsin Airport. Burkinabe are eagerly awaiting the completion of the Donsin International Airport, which is taking a long time to see the light of day. How do you assess today the physical execution rate of the works, and when will this airport, so long awaited by the Burkinabe people, be received? Question 8, related to housing, access to housing and living environment. Where does the government stand with the project to restructure spontaneous housing areas called unplanned settlements? At what stage is the program for clearing the urban land backlog today, as well as that of the real estate development backlog? Question 9, regarding the costs of plots and rents in our country. Faced with the phenomenon of the high cost of living for many of our fellow citizens, what is being done at the government level to relieve our populations regarding plot acquisition and to address rent prices that just keep climbing? Is there not perhaps a necessity to consider placing a price cap on land plots for residential housing and also on rent in Burkina Faso? Health, a question regarding health. So, this is the question regarding the AGSP, the National Agency for Primary Healthcare Management. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the National Agency for Primary Healthcare Management, AGSP, is a public institution responsible for organizing and managing primary healthcare. While this agency currently appears to be a significant and important player in improving healthcare services for the grassroots population, it nevertheless suffers from certain shortcomings. Among other things, we note that seconded agents struggle to receive their financial compensation, even up to 3 years after starting their service. Several revenue orders issued by the AGSP contain errors, and these are always to the disadvantage of the agents. The delay and limitation in the payment of on-call allowances are glaring. Many agents leave the AGSP with unpaid dues outside of their regular salary. In view of the aforementioned dysfunctions, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, I would like to address the following questions to you. Just 2 sub-questions. What do you plan to do to put an end to all these major dysfunctions that are negatively affecting the smooth running of this organization? The second sub-question, would it not be wise to return to a flat rate on-call allowance on payslips in the hospital environment? Question 11. And the last one concerning me. The reasons behind the decision to terminate the Target Malaria Project in Burkina Faso. On August 22nd, 2025, the government of Burkina Faso terminated the Target Malaria Project. What are the objective reasons that led to this decision being made? Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, Mr. President of the Constituent Group, I will now yield the floor to the Honorable Marie-Angèle Kalanzaga for the remaining questions from the PDCE Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the floor. Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, my constituent group has tasked me with bringing to the attention of His Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the continuation and conclusion of the questions from our constituent group. So I am going to continue with the group's questions. Question number 12. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, this question was related to the shortage of butane gas observed recently in Burkina Faso.
And since this question has been addressed by the constituent group of political parties, we will not revisit it. So please allow me to move on to question number 13. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, in Burkina Faso, according to Article 13 of Decree 2018-1199/Press/PM/MUH/MATD/MJDHPC with regard to distribution trade in Burkina Faso. The retail trade is reserved for Burkinabe nationals, except in cases of reciprocity. Foreigners who intend to conduct commercial activities within the country are legally authorized to do so, but only in the wholesale of goods. However, we have observed the ongoing practice of retail sales of various products by non-nationals, sometimes going from compound to compound. The question is as follows. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, can you reassure the national representation of the effective compliance with the provisions of this decree? Question number 14. It is related to APEC. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, the Agency for the Promotion of Community Entrepreneurship, APEC, was officially launched in June 2023. As of now, what update can you please provide on the subscriptions collected and the industrial investment projects completed? Excellency, it is increasingly observed that APEC is becoming less and less visible in the media these days compared to its early days. Does this mean that it has now obtained a sufficient number of subscribers to fully support the financing of its projects? Otherwise, what are the major projects planned for the year 2026 that will require a particularly large subscription from our people? Question number 15, regarding fatal accidents on our roads. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, despite your efforts, there are still many fatal accidents on our roads, both in urban areas and in the open countryside. Indeed, pedestrians walking on the roadway perish under the tires of automobiles. Motorcycle users ignore no entry signs and collide with other road users. Automobiles with malfunctioning or defective braking systems can collide with and sometimes crush road users and their serious property at busy traffic lights. In the open countryside, broken down trucks sometimes remain parked for several days on the roadway, often without even proper signaling. Many roadways have their road markings faded and road signs fallen down. Illegal speeding is still observed, especially after passing an ONASR checkpoint. Such are, among others, the realities of our traffic, reasons for the accidents that bring grief to many families and harm the country's economy. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, what strong measures do you intend to take urgently to fight vigorously against fatal accidents on our roads, in our cities, and our countryside? Question number 16. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, for quite some time now, we have been observing a suspension in the recruitment of certain important health professionals, particularly those working in nursing and obstetric care engineering, as well as nutrition specialists. What are the reasons that explain this situation? Second question for this section. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, may I ask, when will the Public Health Code be formally reviewed? Question number 17. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, on page 12 of your presentation, you mentioned 440 critical dysfunctions in 27 ministries and institutions. Could you tell us what the nature of these dysfunctions is? Question 18. Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, since 2023, the Ministry of Basic Education and the Promotion of National Languages has been organizing a harmonized assessment of learners' achievements in national languages. To this day, those who passed have not yet received their certificates. Your Excellency, what are the reasons for this? And what are the future opportunities and prospects for those who have passed? Question 19. It's the last one, so I'm going to ask it very sportingly. Your Excellency, I'm finishing, or rather starting this question. Truly, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, while conveying the congratulations of my parliamentary group to you and your government for the courageous choice to take back control of the governance of SN Sosuko. However, we do have a small question for you, and we would very much like Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, for you to say a word on the current status of the implementation of the Recovery and Development Plan for SN Sosuko, as you personally announced and stated by yourself during your formal presentation and address regarding the state of the nation, which took place on March 14th in the year 2025, and finally concerning SN Sosuko, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, couldn't APEC be interested in investing there? Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. President of the ALT, I hand over to the chairman of my parliamentary group for the end of our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. This is for the end of our remarks. This is not to ask any more questions. I'll just say to His Excellency, the Prime Minister, that he who can do more can do less. So regarding these few questions asked, well, we have no doubt about the answers he will provide us. Thank you and a good day to all.
I thank the group consisting of parliamentarians appointed by the head of state. Dear fellow deputies, we have reached the end of the interventions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly. As planned, we are going to observe a 2-hour suspension of the session. This will give His Excellency the Prime Minister time to gather the answers to the questions asked by the deputies. On that note, the session is suspended for 2 hours.
Your attention, please. Your attention, please. To continue our work in an effective and efficient manner, we need to recharge our batteries. To this end, 2 tents have been set up outside, and the distribution is as follows. Invited to tent number 1 are the deputies, members of the government, the PM's Secretary General, the PM's Chief of Staff, advisors and mission officers, military and paramilitary forces, and the board.
There we go. We've reached the end of the stage, the question session for the deputies of the Transitional Legislative Assembly. To the Prime Minister, following his presentation, Several organized groups took the floor with several questions in particular. First of all, the civil society group, which asked when the review and drafting of a new constitution would take place. The group also asked the question about what the Burkina Faso of tomorrow will be. On the Prime Minister's presentation, the Prime Minister everything is back in order now. We're moving on to the parliamentary group, the group made up of the region's active forces. This parliamentary group has asked, given the expectations for good governance in Burkina Faso, what measures, or rather what new, the various measures and steps that the government has taken and put in place in order to implement certain important initiatives, especially those that are related to or concern the import of different types of products, which as a result explains how do we explain the justification and the measures taken by the state regarding certain agricultural products that are struggling to sell nationally, products being overshadowed by those coming from abroad? While we wait for the Prime Minister's response to these questions, we'll move on to another parliamentary group. The parliamentary groups formed and chosen by the head of state, the presidency of Faso. This parliamentary group first commended the government's actions led by the government's actions led by Prime Minister Rimtalba Jean Emmanuel Ouedraogo. This parliamentary group also revisited good governance and the fight against corruption in Burkina Faso. One deputy asked, is zero tolerance a reality? And what are the difficulties hindering the implementation of good governance and the fight against corruption in Burkina Faso? And regarding...
Before we conclude, I want to speak directly to you. What we have witnessed is both a declaration of national transformation and a test of democratic accountability. A government presenting results, a parliament raising concerns, a nation redefining its direction. But Africa's future is not built in government chambers alone. It is shaped by informed citizens. So I ask you, do you believe Burkina Faso's security and economic reforms are strong enough to guarantee long-term sovereignty and stability? And secondly, which of the issues raised by deputies, healthcare, housing, education, security, cost of living, or governance reforms do you believe requires the most urgent action? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this video across WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, and all platforms so the conversation continues across the continent. Long live African unity. This is Akosua Prempeh for United States of Africa TV.